Good morning. This morning we have a meeting to consider grandma appeals. We have two items on our revised agenda. The first item is to hear the appeal of Eric Morgan regarding the denial of Governmental Record Access Management Act. Paul Jones, if you want to start us off with this one. Yes.
Sure. Well, I would just recommend we have Mr. Morgan come up and tell us why he thinks his grandma appeal should not have. I assume he's here. Is Mr. Morgan here? Okay. Have him come to the podium, state his reasons that the appeal should not have, or state his reasons that the grandma request should have been granted, and then invite Mr. Griffin to offer argument. If Mr. Morgan wants to speak after that, that's fine with me, but it's up to the chair.
For sure. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Good morning. This is my first time ever doing this, so I apologize if I screw up anything. But so we requested the grant appeal for the pursuit policy of the Utah County Sheriff's Office, and it was returned to us very quickly, but it was returned with pages and pages of redactions, which we didn't think was out of the normal until we started receiving the other pursuit policies we requested from 7 other counties and the Department of Public Safety, which came back with 0 redactions whatsoever. Which I have the whole stack of them here if you guys would like to read them all. They're very similar. And then preparing for this day last week, we received an email from Mr. Griffin saying, I'm sorry they didn't call for any legal counsel for this redacted policy. And so they sent me an updated version, which has a little bit less redaction, but there's still pages and pages of redaction in here. And in that they quoted, I have it up here, Utah Code. After they had corrected themselves, they quoted Utah Code 63G2305, subsection 11, which they say was to preserve the life of a person, which I would agree with, but we got everyone else's policies without any redaction. And in theirs, they also quote that their guidelines will be set by Utah Code 416A to 12. Subsection 6 of that says that the Department of Public Safety will set those minimal guidelines for pursuit policies. And since we have the Department of Public Safety's pursuit policy right here, without any redactions, I feel like their guidelines are pretty good. And I'm just wondering why Utah County would feel that they need to hide all of their pursuit policy. That's about as simple as I can make it, since I'm not that smart. So that's all I got.
Well, thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you. Let me first address the difference between, anyway, yeah, the policy went out redacted without my review. I looked at it again and went ahead and made other redactions. The 4168212 referred to by Mr. Morgan says that the Department of Public Safety will set minimum guidelines for pursuit policies. Those guidelines came out in the form of the Utah Administrative Code. There's a code section which I didn't know about when I sent the redactions, but I since found out about that. It's 728 of the Utah Administrative Code sets out those administrative guidelines. And based on those administrative guidelines, I would in fact create or redact less. I would disclose more in this policy based on those guidelines. Now, I guess the question is, it appears that 7 other counties have given out their game plan, and they have given out their playbook that allows, if anyone that allows anyone who wants to look at those. If those are all public documents, they can look at those. They can anticipate the actions of those deputies to the detriment of the life or safety of individuals. I think Mr. Morgan said as much when he was speaking during his turn. He said, I would agree with that, except for the fact that all of these other counties gave out their policies unredacted. So if the Broncos give out their playbook and their game plan, that doesn't mean the Jets have to do the same. The issue for us is that in Utah County, we want to protect our deputies and our citizens to the maximum extent possible. And so it's really difficult to discuss the particulars without giving up the contents, so I've got to tiptoe around this. The considerations of when to pursue, when not to pursue, and tactics in the pursuit have been redacted. Knowledge of these factors will encourage suspects to flee or engage in reckless or dangerous behavior, creating dangerous situations to jeopardize the life or safety of individuals, of our citizens and our deputies. It would encourage evasive and dangerous actions and maneuvers to either terminate a pursuit or to be able to get away. And this is, in my mind, it's a use of force policy, because the use of force is used to terminate these pursuits. We should guard this policy as closely as the use of force policy. So, I don't know exactly where you want to go with this. Maybe what I'll do is let you know, based on the Department of Public Safety guidelines, which further redactions or disclosures I think would be appropriate. But again, if someone has the knowledge of what we're going to do and when we're going to do it, then that puts the public and and deputies at risk. So under 6-400.02 pursuit criteria, because these criteria are contained in this Utah Administrative Code rule published by the Department of Public Safety, I would not redact subsections 1 through 8, nor would I redact the next paragraph at the top of the next page. I would not redact boxing in and its definition, nor would I redact channeling in its definition under 400.04. I would unredact paralleling and primary unit. Also, I would unredact the term ramming, but I would keep the definition of ramming.
Can I interject real quick?
Yeah.
If you would unredact them, the first copy went out, redacted heavily, and you said, but you hadn't reviewed it. Now you reviewed it, and now you're claiming that you would unredact more after you reviewed it.
Because of the Utah Administrative Code guidelines. These are things that are contained in those guidelines.
I guess then my concern is the initial review.
Well, sometimes...
Why didn't we follow the Utah Administrative Code when we did the initial review?
These are new guidelines, something that was just passed this year. And so it's not something that was in the general knowledge. These only came into effect, I believe it was June 5th. Let's see. You know, I'm not sure, but I think it was July 1st. So these are new guidelines.
Maybe let me give you a few comments and you can speak to them.
Sure.
First off, in regards to both NFL teams' playbooks, if you want them, just ask Bill Belichick. So let's get that right? So, Patriots have them. The problem I have is the sheriff is aware of every city's policies for pursuits, okay? I understand why a representative from any news media would do it. Utah County has recently been in the news for 2 such pursuits that have resulted in high publicity for whatever, okay, whatever the case may be. It is in the public's interest to know those pursuit policies, especially if cities are unredacting and letting the sheriff know, and some pursue and some don't. that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when we create a policy. It is the public's right to know. That is not giving up our playbook by disclosing, hey, we adhere to the law and we follow the law, in my opinion. So I don't know why we would redact. I understand why we redact and withhold personal information that could be damaging to a person. But I do not understand why we would ever, as a county, redact county policies that serve the public. The public deserves to know their policies.
Well, under grandma, if that were the case, under grandma, everything would be public.
Okay.
But there are, I don't know, 40, 50 categories of private and protected classifications, one of which is to protect, is so as not to injure, endanger the life or safety or jeopardize the life or safety of an individual. And so that's why we're here.
Gort, can you give me an example of
Yeah.
that?
What,
Where, maybe hypothetically, so you don't have to look at the playbook or expose it, but how this policy would jeopardize that?
if an individual knows why a deputy will or will not, or what a deputy will look at in discontinuing a pursuit, this individual may try to create that condition requiring the deputy to discontinue the pursuit, and by doing that may cause harm either to the deputy or the public.
So no
So-
pursuit and inaction creates harm to both those individuals or both parties. I'm definitely not following that logic.
The logic is that if someone knows that a certain condition will cause a deputy to discontinue the pursuit and allow him to get away, he will create that condition.
So hypothetically, if our policy is we stop pursuing at 70 miles an hour, it's just a number, and that's publicly known, then obviously if you're a criminal, you're gonna go 75 miles an hour, so the deputy stops pursuing, you can escape and then continue on with your illegal behavior.
Uh-huh.
And that creates a harm.
Well,
If
that's,
they go shoot somebody after they flee the deputy, it would create a harm.
Sure,
So, I
but
mean,
that's a
that's-
different action. That's not a pursuit.
But because we failed to pursue, we enabled them to do that when we could have had them in custody if we continued pursuing.
and so let's talk about something that recently happened in Utah County that I think would emphasize this kind of thing, is that there was a pursuit that started in Juab County, came into Utah County, resulted in an exchange of gunfire after a felony stop at the Spanish Fork exit. They stopped him at just north of the Spanish Fork exit at Highway 6. He took off, a pursuit ensued, and the deputies were able to successfully terminate that pursuit at an off-ramp and keep him from getting off of the off-ramp. And so, would we have had the same result if he had known what he was doing? Pursuits are dangerous, and because they're dangerous, we need to keep every advantage with the deputies and the public.
Okay, but that may be, to me, the most poorest example, because the only harm that became the public in that wasn't from actually the guy who pursued. And I understand we had a reasonable, or at least I think it's been ruled, deemed a useful exchange of force or use of force with the gunfire. However, it was only law enforcement that unintentionally created the harm in that particular case. It wasn't the pursuit, it was the gunfire, and it was the gunfire of law enforcement, not the pursuit. The pursuit stopped him. So that, to me, that's why I mean they're two separate actions, right? That's why the attorney's office, the county attorney, reviews the criminal matter for those, not the pursuit in that case.
The whole point of it is a deputy never knows who he's pulling over.
Sure.
He never knows what's gonna happen. He never knows what their circumstance is. And sometimes they pull over the wrong guy and really bad things happen.
Yeah, we've experienced that here.
Yes, we have.
So another question for you that I have. I'm sure that the other 6 or 7 counties that gave up all of theirs, are you claiming that they're endangering their officers and the public by them giving it up? And why, if we've had 6 or 7 other legal firms looking at it, all of a sudden now we're seeing it different? Where's that comparison?
Well, I don't know what process was gone through to release those. I don't know if they had legal review, if they decided to do it, I don't know.
Would safely assume that they would go through a process semi-similar to ours.
I don't know why they did that. But the focus here is on the citizens of Utah County and the deputies of Utah County. And the knowledge of these policies would jeopardize the safety of an individual.
So the other counties, 6 or 7 counties that put that out are jeopardizing their citizens by doing this?
Yes, I would.
So here's my other thing. The sheriff, outside of a commission meeting, has approached the commission, okay? And not to great length discussed a pursuit policy, but whether the county should review a policy. So when involving the commission, it has to be an open, transparent, and public process. So therefore, we would conduct it in a commission meeting. The commission would make available that thing. So if the sheriff is willing to go through that with the commission, how can we claim that? Because he's never going to endanger his deputies or anybody in that matter. So
Well,
help me get through that.
well, in order to amend his policy, he doesn't have to come to the commission.
I know, but he
He doesn't
engaged the
have to make
commission.
it, he doesn't have to make it a matter of public record.
Well, except for when he engages the commission, then that's a different process. You're right, I agree. He does not have to. But then again, when you approach the commission, the legislative body to create a countywide policy, that's a different level. And the sheriff sought us out. We didn't seek him out.
Well, I can't speak to those conversations because I wasn't a party to them, but my understanding is that the sheriff's office currently has the pursuit policy under review, not only because of the recent incidents, but also because of this Utah Administrative Code, and is going to review their policy and in light of the code and these incidents, and review and revise it. But I don't think it's not going to be made public.
Okay.
I want you to help me through a thought process that I have that concerns me a little bit, and I know this is a delicate balance, because I understand what you're saying, but help me through on a governmental entity. I'll just put it this way. The good guys playbook gets to be seen and known. I think the public needs to know when they're stopped, what their rights are, what the process is, what they have to go through, what they should be expecting. I think that the playbook is open and it should be known. The bad guys playbook is always closed and it's always hidden, and we know that. We know it'll always be that way because they never want to let you know what's going on next because they're secretive about it. So help me through why a policy like this should not be known to the public.
Well,
You're saying it endangers the life of deputies and citizens.
Let's tiptoe around one of these and go to the last page. I assume you have a copy of what I sent out last.
Yeah, we have both redacted and unredacted copies that we've reviewed.
So what process do
this-
you go through for a DUI checkpoint?
Well, and see, a DUI checkpoint isn't even under this policy.
I know, but it's theoretically, what do you do for a DUI checkpoint? What do we notice? What do we put out?
Well, you tell them, they basically have to tell everybody where it is.
Yeah, that's interesting that we're putting the playbook out. We're saying where we're gonna have the DUI checkpoint. Because the good guys always do that, right? They wanna make sure that their rights are upheld beforehand.
And I think that is mandated by case law.
I'm just using that as an example. We're
yeah.
telling them,
I mean-
okay, look, down this road, we're gonna have a DUI checkpoint.
I mean, it's put out to it is publicized. Not everyone gets that,
Right.
but
And I don't know if everyone's gonna read the playbook for every
Yeah,
county on what they
yeah.
do as they go back and forth
so,
either.
so that is. Sure. Sheriff, would you like to address the checkpoint?
I think I'd like
He's more knowledgeable than I am. I'm a civil attorney.
Sheriff Tracy, to address your point, Commissioner Lee, why would we hide or why would we protect a policy? If we put out the specifics of let's say a policy that we change, and we make a specific hard judgment and put in policy a specific directive that gives deputies finite information on when they can and can't pursue. An individual, after the lights are turned on, exceeds the speed limit by 3 miles more an hour than what he was doing. That is considered a pursuit, and that's our policy. Every bad guy knows exactly what he needs to do to get away from that point on. That's why some of those things are protected, to try to at least allow the bad guys not to have all the playbooks so that they can make a decision prior to about how to defeat the good guys in every case.
Yeah.
That's why some of those things are protected.
And so the other 6 or 7 counties that just gave the whole playbook out there, you're saying you're just incorrect. I mean, they're risking their citizens and their deputies' lives.
I
by
think
putting it out
I
there.
think it puts it more jeopardy. That's correct. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
On top of the reason, why are we now looking at our policies? In July, the statute went into effect, well, the administrative rule went into effect by the legislature that was mandated that we look at and put into place a policy that is not more restrictive than the Department of Public Safety's policy. That was the model policy that they directed us to look at to revamp and revise all other pursuit policies. That was a directive through the Administrative Office of the Rules Administration. That's why we're going into that also at this time.
Okay.
So, Commissioner Lee, you asked it about a specific instance. If you go to the policy 460 about medical assistance and look at what, the directive on rendering medical assistance during a pursuit, I think it's fairly obvious that knowledge of this policy could lead a criminal to create a condition to require the pursuit to be terminated, which would cause serious harm to the public. And so any advantage that anyone can, that if the bad guys are able to anticipate what a deputy's going to do, that lessens the likelihood of capturing a suspect and terminating the pursuit as soon as possible. And if the pursuit, the longer the pursuit goes on, the more chance, the more risk there is at someone else being injured. I think what deputies do is difficult enough without giving the bad guys and the criminals the playbook and the game plan. A sure way to prevent future pursuits is to give this out. I don't know of any deputy who would engage in a pursuit with the knowledge that who he's pursuing knows exactly what he's going to do. And while KSL may not publish the policy generally, a finding that this is a public record would entitle anyone else to receive a copy of it and use it and disseminate the policy and use it against law enforcement. Redaction is necessary to bring dangerous situations to a conclusion as soon as possible, minimizing dangerous high-risk situations. Every avenue should be preserved to protect deputies and the public involved. Whether the suspect would read it is really irrelevant. The focus is if it was known or released, would it jeopardize the life or safety of an individual? And the Utah County Sheriff's Office pursuit policy is not known in the public domain. The tools that it has and decides to use may not be the same tools that another city decides to use.
Court,
Yeah.
I can make this pretty simple from my perspective.
Sure.
I think we follow the statute and the administrative rule and release the information that is required, but we protect what we feel is sensitive information that makes sure that we have the upper hand in stopping crime in this county when it comes to these type of policies. So, it is essential that we follow those minimum guidelines and release what is required.
And again, I did a review of the policy, of our policy versus those administrative rules, and am prepared to redact further, to disclose further items in this policy. But there are some things
So
that,
can I also, in an attempt to speed this up, just
Yeah.
because I think I don't know that we disagree with Commissioner Ivy's statement. I think he's also attempting to speed this up. What I think the commission would like, because we have 5 days to issue a thing, I'd love to see your new unredacted in compliance, the way you feel it's in compliance. If possible, I would like that within 24 hours so I can review it so that I can still, in a timely manner, give a response. I think that would help in this matter so that we can see how and why, and then we can come to you and say, you know, why not this or why that
Sure.
individually.
I'll need to see it
Sure.
today.
But, yeah,
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 Right.
I-
right, I'm just
I'll be
saying
gone tomorrow.
ASAP.
And so I think there's your direction.
okay,
We'll get
I
our
can do
ruling
that.
issued after you make those revisions.
okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Appreciate it. All right, next on our grandma
Chairman?
appeal. Yes.
Normally, we would give the
Uh,
requester a chance to make any final comments.
correct.
they want, if any.
Brief, sorry, I appreciate the correction. You'd kind of made the statement that was what you had to say, and I apologize
Yeah.
for not giving you that other
No, I just
opportunity.
have one brief thing to add. One county in particular has their whole pursuit policy.
Mhm.
This is to address Sheriff Tracy's concern about someone going 3 miles over whatever the limit would be. This county has this entire policy on how to pursue, and then they have one paragraph in there that says, we don't have any vehicles that are rated to pursue. This whole policy would be for nothing, because they don't have any vehicles that can pursue, but they still have this policy. So I believe that there would be extenuating circumstances in all cases that would allow the deputy to go over that limit. That's all.
A question for you.
Yes, sir.
Was it 6 or 7 that you have? How many do you have?
7 completely unredacted ones.
6 counties and DPS.
Yeah, sorry, 6 counties and DPS.
Could I get a copy of them?
I can give you all the ones I have in my hand.
We done with that one?
I believe so, yes. We'll now move on to the second item on this, and this is the appeal for Greg Graves regarding denial of government records.
Okay, thank you, Commission. I would once again, first off, like to thank the Commission for hearing this expedited request. I also would like to thank Utah County for singling me out and making mine in italics and bold. It's nice to be singled out again by the county. This is a response. I had an original grandma request as a private citizen on July 2nd. The county, the reason I bring that up is they've had all the time in the world to start after these records. It was about 3 weeks later after I raised the issue and said I haven't heard anything that I then was approached by Dave Shawcroft in the civil division, who then said, well, this is vague, this is vague, this is vague. And rather than working through that, asked me to resubmit. When I resubmitted, following the laws, I asked for an expedited response. So I got that. However, I'm greatly offended at some of these things. For example, in the response to me, it says the county does not reimburse cell phones for any individuals named in my request. However, checking with the clerk auditor using account number 100-41340-2800, 25% of that budget has already been expensed and reimbursed for cell phones. That's exactly what it's used. So I'm offended that the county would deny a record and say, and claim we don't have it, when in fact we do as a county have that. Then they go on to say similar emails have been requested and we cannot give them until September 10th. Again, the request was made July 2nd. Commissioner Lee years ago had the county's emails policies changed, and so that we could expedite these requests. Filters exist at which the county can, in fact, give those emails much sooner. So 90 days, to me, is far outside the scope of what the county can do and has been able to do in other regards. Also, some of the ones that ask for August 13th, to me, is fair and within the timeline.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
I gotta go back to the cell phone one. I'm not sure I followed that.
So I requested cell phone records that, again, the county may or may not possess, right?
Right.
Not knowing. But then the county says, we do not have cell phones for any of the individuals named on your request. We did not create and do not have or maintain such records, and therefore cannot produce these per code 63G2 2018. However, in the budget process, and it even shows on the county audit, and checking with the clerk auditor, we do in fact have 100-41340-2800 as an account, of which nearly 25% of that budgeted amount has been spent for the expense and reimbursement of cell phones. So the county does have a record because the clerk auditor has a long history of verifying receipts and matching those for the proper reimbursement. That's the county policy.
For cell phones.
For cell phones.
Yes, for cell phones. So whatever they would have, I believe is a public document.
Okay.
So, then some of what I was given, I asked for all audits within the Human Resource Department conducted since 2016. The clerk auditor has their duty, and it is their elected right and responsibility to do such audits. I was given half of those audits that exist. The reason I am aware of half is because in checking with the clerk auditor's office and showing them what I had, they have in fact made me aware that there were 2 additional audits at which were not given to me. I gave them a copy of the entire email that was responded to me, and since they are the ones that perform the audit and feel as a department, as the clerk auditor, an elected official, that those audits should be public information. He's asked the commission at times, he believes they should be published on the website. Well, if he believes all the findings should be published on the website, I do not know why they would not be granted in a GRAMA appeal, in a GRAMA request, excuse me. So, outside of the dates of September 10th, which I find unreasonable, and being asked to resubmit a request in order for them to comply with what I believe are violations of my GRAMA, of the state GRAMA code, I would ask the commission for the immediate release of those records that are available and move all the deadlines up to August 13th, which I believe would be reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. Pona Sitake, Deputy County Attorney, filling in for Ben Van Noy today. A couple of things to address Commissioner Graves' request.
Not Commissioner Graves.
Sorry, Greg Graves, private citizen Greg Graves' request. First of all, the dates and time frame that we've set out are to address the volume of the information to process. There are currently 34,000 emails, and Diane Samudio is usually the only one who reviews those emails. So that's why the dates are where they are. To address his concerns about an expenditure of a cell phone reimbursement account, there are cell phones that are being reimbursed for. If he'd like to request that entirety of that list and see all of those accounts that are being reimbursed for, that's fine, he can do that. It just so happens that his request specified certain individuals, and none of those individuals receive allowance for requests for their cell phone. So that's just how that happens. To kind of get to
So on the specific cell phones requested, none of those are reimbursed from the account that he specifically.
correct, and that's where I want to head today, because that's the only thing that we really have to address for this appeal hearing is the definition of a record. And a record, by statute in 63G-2-103 sub 22 parenthetical A, defines what a record means, and it means prepared, owned, received, or retained by a governmental entity. And because these private citizens pay their own cell phone bills, we don't retain that as a record. Specifically in subsection B of 63G-2-103, subsection 22, it says a record does not mean a personal note or communication prepared or received by an employee or an officer of a governmental entity if that person is acting outside of the employee or officer's governmental capacity, or if it's unrelated to the conduct of their work. And so for us to kind of go back and request what a record is not, someone else's cell phone records, that's not a record. We can't do that. 63G-2-201 subsection A specifically states that in response to a request, a governmental entity is not required to create a record. And we cannot create a record that is by definition not a record. And we cannot create a record by definition isn't owned, retained, prepared, or received by a governmental entity. And so we can't give cell phone records to individuals that we have no cell phones for. We don't reimburse those individuals for their cell phone bills. We can't give those records out. If there is any other questions, I'd be happy to address them now, but I think that's it. Oh, yes, the audit. So those two audits that Greg is referring to, those haven't been completed yet. And so by statutory definition, it is a draft, and by statute, it is not a record yet. And so we have to have time to prepare and finish drafts and to finish audits. You know how that works. In the past, we've done that as well, where something has been a draft or an audit is ongoing or investigation has not yet been complete. We don't give that out until it's complete. That's just kind of the way things work. If any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are you gonna speak?
Great.
Well, actually, while Greg's on his way down, maybe just point out, just for complete public disclosure, there may be some possibly minor conflicts of interest that should probably just be disclosed on the record. Possibly Greg may have a minor conflict, and I don't know if the other commissioners feel like they have a conflict here, but just to have it stated on the record and disclosed.
Well, Commissioner Graves has read his constitutional duties on recusing or disclosure, and it's for monetary gain, and access to public records inherently carries no financial gain, so he would not be disclosing any such conflict.
Well, I'll put a disclosure in there that the records that are being sought are personal records of mine, and so because they're personal records of mine, there is a form of disclosure I think needs to be,
Okay.
at least addressed.
Fair enough. So in response to Mr. Sataki's things, 63G-2-102, and I know he skipped to 201, talks about legislative intent. In enacting this act, and this is for grandma, the legislature recognizes two constitutional rights. A public's right to access to information concerning the conduct of the public's business. In going down to number 3 in that, the intent of the legislature is A, promote the public's right of easy and reasonable access to unrestricted public records. So again, this county has a tendency, in my view, to withhold and say drafts or work product, and we hold back information when it is very clear to promote the public's right to easy and reasonable access to unrestricted public records. So regardless of whether the record is 34,000, whether it's 48 or whether it's 2, doesn't matter. Unrestricted access to public records is just that. It also then goes on to say that to prevent abuse of confidentiality by governmental entities by permitting confidential treatment of records only in C. So I have a problem with claiming confidentiality or public records. All elected officials, all county employees understand that everything we do is public. It's the Utah County's business. Regardless of the request for information, whatever the attorneys perceive, the state code is very clear on allowing unrestricted access to public records. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Response?
I think I've already made it clear what the law is and what the record is and is not, and so I don't think there's anything further to address.
Perfect. We anticipate having a ruling on this within the 5-day requirement. Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we'll bring to close these particular hearings, and we will now get those worked through and prepare for our commission meeting.
I know. I was just stating that to the public, absolutely. I know you weren't. We've had that discussion.
Okay, we are now ready to start our Utah County Board of Commissioners meeting for today, July 31st. We appreciate your attendance with us today and are grateful for you joining us. As is typical, we like to begin our meeting with a prayer, reading, or thought, followed with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we looked at participants who would be willing to volunteer to lead us in those. The prayer? Thank you, Andrew. Is there someone who'd be willing to lead us in the pledge? Yes. Perfect. Thank you. Again, just state your name for the record, please.
Andrew Jackson with Mountain Land Association of Governments. Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for our many blessings. We're thankful for the life we have. We're thankful for the freedoms which we have in this great country. We're thankful for our founding fathers who have established the rules that we follow. We pray that they'll bless our men and women in service, that they'll be protected. Bless those who protect us. We also pray that we'll be able to keep calm in our discussions today, and we'll be able to work out issues and problems that face the county as a whole and be able to make wise decisions. Again, we're thankful for this opportunity that we have to meet in this meeting, and we say this in His Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you to those who participated with us in that. We will now go through the process of building our agenda. All items will be considered moved to consent unless held for further discussion. We do have a fairly large number of items on our agenda today. Starting off with, on our consent agenda, there are currently 36 items. Of those 36 items, I do have item number 30 noted to be tabled for our closed meeting. Are there any additional changes to or questions on the consent agenda items?
I just have a quick one on two, since we heard 2 appeals today. Do we not need to amend with the amended documents number 2 for the special meeting for grandma appeals?
We probably would, Rob, would we need to, right?
Unless we've done it somewhere else. I was just checking.
I don't remember.
I don't remember seeing
seeing
it somewhere else.
Yes, that's true. That happened on Friday, I think. So.
Right.
Right,
And given our short time frame, we had to do that.
right. Okay, so consent number 2 will be amended for ratification of the 2 agenda items on the grandma appeal. Any additional questions on consent?
Yes, I'd make a recommendation that we continue number 15 until August 21st. A few things I'd like to check off on that just a little bit further, if that'd be all right, to continue that to the 21st.
I'm fine with that.
And then, number 21, again, and I'll probably say this every time, so law enforcement don't shoot me, literally. 4 hours is our minimum. I just want to make sure and state that it will be billed for 4 hours, although they're only asking for 2 to be there.
We're seeing the nods.
Yeah. And then, if we could table number 31 till after our closed meetings, that'd be helpful too.
Okay,
We're tabling 30 and 31.
30 and 31 on tables closed. Okay, everything else will remain on consent. We'll now look at our regular agenda.
Commissioners,
Yes,
There's something on number 7 that I probably ought to bring up with you, if you want to hold that, or if you want me to talk about it now.
why don't you, I would be fine with you addressing that now if the
Okay.
others are.
So this is a subdivision, 4-lot subdivision, and it looks good, the application. There is one condition of approval that is still outstanding. The county bought a piece of land at Lincoln Point, and it technically is, it was created by an unapproved division of land. The county's been working on a deed to combine that land with the Boat Harbor property, Lincoln Boat Harbor property. That deed is prepared, it just hasn't been recorded yet. And so I guess we have two options. We could, I guess, continue this item till next week, or the other thing that Richard Nilsson and I were talking about is approving the clerk auditor's office to sign that deed so that it can be recorded, so that this application could be approved.
Approving it subject to the recording.
Record, exactly.
I would be fine approving subject to the recording.
I'm okay with that too.
Sure.
I think we
Do we
probably.
need to make that as a separate?
Well,
Yeah,
it's
that's
actually
fine.
already on the agenda item. It says
Yeah.
subject to the staff report.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we're covered even where it's subject there. Okay, perfect. All right, now looking at our regular agenda items, we had 24 items on our regular agenda. I have, I believe, let me get these right here. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 is, nope, well, 10 we'll need to. 6, 7, 8, and 9, we have to hold and do individually correct with findings as individual motions. I believe number 10 would have some discussion on number 10 and 11, and also discussion on number 14 and 15.
If we could hold number 2, just to make sure. And did you say number 12? I can't remember if you said 12.
I did not have 12.
You could hold number 12 for just a minor change.
Okay.
And then you said 14, 15,
Yes.
and so if we left 16 on, that would just automatically go to the planning commission, correct? Or
Correct.
do we have to actually do a formal action to review it?
It would just automatically go.
Just
It would go-
automatically
yes.
go?
And they've actually noticed it up already.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, on
Yes.
number 20, just, I think you've discussed this before. We received an insurance policy in the amount of $2 million. It's short of our normal 2.5. If you want me to go back and get 2.5, we can do that, but I think there was a discussion with you previously that that was a difficulty for them. That's their normal 2 million, so there'll be a little bit of a gap. Are you okay with that, or do you?
What number are you on?
20.
20.
Let's hold that for discussion
hold
because
it
I
then.
have some definite
Okay.
issues that we should talk about.
Okay.
Could we also hold number 19,
Yes.
just for some follow-up on that one?
Mhm.
Do you need some clarification on which ones we're doing?
Yes, please, may I repeat that back to you?
Sure, I can give you my list. How's that?
Oh,
You ready? So I've got 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 19, 20, and, oh, well, those are our closed meetings. We'll need 21, 23, and 24.
And for consent agenda items. Number 2 will be amended to reflect both grant appeals.
Correct?
Number 15 will be continued to August 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
And numbers 30 and 31 will be tabled until after closed.
Correct. Perfect. All right, with that, we will now move to regular agenda item number 2. This is to approve property tax actions contained in the recommendation letter 2018-12. Commissioner Lee, I believe you had questions on this one.
Oh, yes. Well, actually, I have it up here.
I did as well. Paul, do you have the amended letter that I asked for? Copies for each commissioner?
I don't have copies for you. It should be uploaded.
It's not unless I.
I may need to refresh.
Okay. Still not.
I can provide one copy.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So we have, and we've attempted to amend the recommendation letter to include a third property. But we can take them in any order that the Board of Commissioners would like.
Well, I only see the 2 properties on here.
Here's the third one.
Where's the third?
Yeah, we are,
Was this noticed?
I don't think we have a notice issue. It was not amended. It's currently being amended. It just uploaded.
Okay, so what,
As far as the Open and Public Meetings Act goes, we don't have an issue. The agenda item is to address a tax recommendation letter, and so
yeah, it's now updated on the
we
system.
are we're in compliance with the Open and Public Meetings Act. This is kind of like amending an item within the agenda.
It just didn't go out there for the public to see it, right?
That would be correct.
Okay.
However, it was turned in over 2 weeks ago.
You're gonna have to spend some time on this one since it's just brand new.
Sure.
Would it be best
So
to
whatever
continue
order you
this
wanna go,
item?
and you wanna start with Peters?
I think it was turned in like a week and a half ago, but
The 19th.
Yeah.
12 days.
well, that's,
Close enough to 2 weeks.
that's a week and a half. But yeah.
Take it outside.
So do you wanna start with Peters then?
Sure, so we have
Announce
Mr. Belliston's request here. He's asking us to go back a few years. Between he and his neighbor, they have appealed their value, one or the other, over the past few years. And now he wants to go back and sort of readjust the value for previous years. You can see here, I believe, Ms. Reeve from our assessor's office has done a valuation of what she thinks would be the appropriate values. My recommendation is to deny it because these valuation issues, there's a different process to go through that. Board of Equalization, followed by appeals to the State Tax Commission. And I've been consistent in saying that those valuation issues should be pursued through those avenues, absent some unconscionable difference in value, possibly. These differences are fairly minimal, and it's my opinion, my recommendation that this request be denied because those avenues weren't exhausted.
Can I ask you, based on what Clarissa has given us,
You can invite her up here.
her little table? No, I'm just asking as a matter of law, because you give us the legal. So what she's prepared is a subject and an adjacent listing the IDs for both parcels, the adjacent one and the requester's property, okay? 28 and 29 respectively. It's on page 5 of that packet. The concern I have is in 2014, we appraised it at 273.6. In 2015, we lowered it to 173.3, matching the adjacent properties, at which, by the way, the adjacent property stayed flat for those 2 years. And then in 2016, the 173 went to 184, but we then again raised it to 248. So I guess my question is there's a huge difference in the valuations. Does what appears to be an error in assessing not allow the commission to, I guess, change that as a matter of law?
So for 2014, both parcels were appealed to the local level and were denied. Then the adjacent parcel was appealed to the state, and that one was adjusted. Then for 2015, that value was carried forward and on both parcels. You know, I, based on that decision, equalized everything. And then in 2016, the adjacent parcel was appealed, his was not. And that was the outcome of the BOE for the adjacent parcel. So not the initial assessment, but the adjustment.
Okay, so my question then to you, before again Paul addresses the law and if the commission has the ability to even hear or change this, I guess I would like to know the circumstances in which a parcel can go from 273 to 173 back to 248 without significant, like, hey, they had a house, they removed a house, they built a house in those 3 years.
That's just vacant property.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, that for vacant land,
There's nothing that changed.
that was my point, that's what it looked like in the packet. So I'd say this tax-paying citizen has a pretty valid argument and frustration
Well,
that,
I think so too. Absolutely. It doesn't make any sense. And I think you feel the same way.
There are 3 properties like this in the entire county. They are 5 1/4 acre lots adjacent to Utah Lake and Saratoga Springs. Whether or not they are buildable has changed over time as they've been annexed into Saratoga Springs, as the market has adjusted. I mean, they're 5 1/4 acre lakefront properties. They're incredibly unique. And of course, I don't have any sales of 5 1/4 acres because of lakefront properties, because there are only 3 of these. So I'm taking other sales and trying to extrapolate and come up with a value. Part of the evidence from the 2014 state appeal was from the city of Saratoga Springs saying they wouldn't be developable unless XYZ conditions had been met. But that information didn't come in until the state level. So I didn't have that information at the local level. As development has continued to happen out there, properties to the south have been subdivided and split and sold as multiple lakefront lots. And so what the value of these would be is incredibly difficult to determine.
Sure.
I'm not saying that my initial assessments are wrong, but I'm saying that through the appeal process, these are the values. And if, I mean,
to have that difference of a valuation from a lot that's touching a lot, because that's what adjacent is. We have 2 lots,
Yes.
both on the lake.
How
Since-
identical are they?
they're fairly identical.
Hey,
But once again, it's
you're
not
not
the
helping
initial.
my thought here on this adjacent. If they're
they're
identical,
Yeah,
Yeah.
your words,
yeah,
And if they're
they,
next to each other and one's got a cliff,
cliff,
the other
right.
one's got
yeah,
flat
no, they
land.
are pretty identical. They're,
Okay.
I mean, yeah, they're not major differences between the 2.
and then again, we say they're identical, one's worth $100,000 more. The next year we say they're even. The next year this one's worth $75,000 more. Again, they're identical. So I guess more as a matter of law, Paul, why can't I, as a commissioner, vote to fix that?
Well,
Are there any exceptions in law, outside of BOE? I know commission can
And
abate the tax.
Specifically talk about the inequity of this.
Right. Well, number one, the Board of Commissioners cannot change the value of property.
Right.
At this point.
We can
So-
abate taxes, though.
Right, you may not change the value. If you find that the best interest of the state and the citizens of the county would require you to give a forgiving of tax, you could do that. So by law, you could forgive some tax amount, but you may not change the value.
Would this continue though next year? I mean, also now next year and we'd have to do this every single year?
2017 is currently in the appeal process. Both parcels are before the tax commission for 2017.
There also a difference like this?
No, they are initially they were all valued the same. These are post-hearing adjustments. This is not the initial difference coming out of the assessor's office.
Okay.
Now, do I really feel that this adjustment is necessarily? Not necessarily, but I'm taking his complaint and making it something that would be logical to proceed with.
So Paul, if it goes through this other process that you're talking about, which is more normal, it could still come back to us in the end.
Sure. Yeah, not the value. The value issue
Not the
is
value
not
issue.
determined by the commissioners.
Right.
So you see these different values. See, those values were, they were eventually set by going through this process. One property owner appealed, one didn't. That's why they have different values. It's my office's position that's the process you go through to change your value. You don't sort of fix it on the back end.
Sure you do. When you
But
when you realize that the government has created an inequity, why wouldn't you try and attempt to fix it on the back end? Hence why we recreate ordinances, we draft ordinances that fix it, because we're trying to fix it on the back end.
right.
Well, and I would agree.
Right.
The only thing is I'd like to have the process go through so they could possibly fix this thing long-term instead of us doing a short fix, maybe every
Right.
year.
We
Except
fix
for,
it.
if I hear it right, the appeal for 2014, 2015, and 2016 is only gonna come back to us because its evaluation is set, only gonna ever appear to the commission as an abatement for the tax. That process is closed for those 3 years.
That's my understanding. So 14, 15, and 16 are not being,
Right,
those
17 will
valuations
come
and
through
tax
BOE.
amounts are all
That's the
set.
difference.
So this $1,900 right now, which is the difference, as I'm reading it,
1908.99.
yep, 1908.99. That's not going through any process. That's done.
Correct.
So
And that's
if-
all we have before us right now.
Yeah, right, so we can either abate the tax, issue a credit,
14, 15, and
or
16,
deny it.
and those aren't being challenged. Those are set.
Well, I'm not inclined to deny it then if this is all we have before us and there's no process to go through.
Right. Okay, do we wanna move on to number 2 then,
Yeah.
on that?
Let me just make a comment, Clarissa, if you wouldn't mind. Is this the amount the taxpayer wanted refunded, and this is the amount that you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to allow the commissioners to be informed, the taxpayer prepared his own sheet, and he's requesting $3,887.05 in refund. Ms. Reeve prepared her sheet, and she recommends the 1908.
And the 1908.99, because of you, again, using her words, is calling these properties identical. The 1908.99 would in essence give a refund, putting the value of both parcels at the same value. That's how she got to the 1908.99. I can 100%
those 3
support
years.
that, right.
Which is $1,193.57 for 2014, zero for 2015 because they were the same, and $715.42 for 2016.
Right.
Yeah, so you may want to just clarify which of these
We will.
amounts
Let's move on to the second one.
looking at. Okay, we have John Renstrom property. Just to point out, this is a third appeal, and this is the third time he's come before you. So we know there's two different levels of penalty when you're late on your taxes. There's a first penalty and a second penalty. And Mr. Renstrom claims that he did not get his notice, his tax notice, and therefore he was late. And then he appealed. He did not pay his taxes, and he appealed. Then through that process, while that was working through, and he appealed a second time after he was denied, he was hit with the second penalty as well. And so I believe what he's saying is that he believes that the tax notice was inadvertently delivered to his next door neighbor. He thinks it sat in his next door neighbor's house for a little while, and then finally the next door neighbor brought him his mail, and at that point it was already late, triggering the late fee.
Which is why he wants the first and the second penalty abated.
Yes, he wants the first and second penalty waived. My recommendation was to forgive the second penalty as he worked through the appeal process.
And his neighbor sent a letter
Stating that fact.
stating that, yes, that was delivered to his house. It sat there for some time before he gave it to his neighbor, back to neighbor.
Yeah, I don't think he goes so far as to say, I recall that the tax notice was in the stack, but that he delivered a stack of mail to the neighbor at this
Hey,
time.
well, we
Well, he
can't
says
prove
that he-
what or what, but the fact is that the neighbor admitted mail is unintentionally given to him.
His letter does say, I realized I had received several important tax documents.
Oh, okay.
That was in his letter. Third paragraph.
Of course, my office's position is, you know your taxes are due, and you ought to pay them on time. But the commission is free to,
So your office feels that, but yet you still want to abate the second penalty.
well, as he worked through the appeal process, that's,
And he's not trying, we're not talking about abating the taxes, we're only talking about abating penalties in this
Right,
case.
just penalties
This
and
one's just
interest.
penalties and
Right.
interest.
yeah, penalties and interest, I believe.
He's not saying, I don't owe tax.
This is a penalty and interest.
Right.
I'm inclined for both,
Yep.
Yes.
first and second. Penalties and interest only, not the tax.
Yeah. That will be in my motion.
Okay.
Okay, that brings us to the third property that we amended the letter with this morning. And this, this property, I can't remember the name of the owner, and Commissioner Lee's got the only copy there.
It's now on the system.
WMPFP Partners?
Right. I think we call this the Wayne Patterson property, but this application, this request is actually the first request that the Board of Commissioners is reviewing after the resolution was passed a few weeks ago regarding treatment of rollback taxes rollback taxes that were triggered because of a change in legal description when the property was and is and continues to operate under Greenbelt. You're familiar with the resolution?
Hmm.
Okay, so we looked at this property, and it appears to qualify under the requirements of the resolution. Notably, the property has been received back in Greenbelt, which was one of the important criteria. They are current on their Greenbelt taxes, which was an important criteria. According to the resolution, the procedure here, if the commission feels so inclined, is to defer the property for 5 years so that we have that, we have the ability to kind of institute the property or that rollback and collect a 5-year rollback at any time. And then in 5 years, as long as the property still qualifies, at that point, it would be abated. I believe my notes there would reflect that what we still need is an abatement / deferral agreement that we can record against the property so future owners would be aware that there is this deferred Greenbelt property tax out there. That will probably need to come on the agenda next week or at a future week, but
You see that as something that we should not take action on this because of that?
well, I think it's fine if you take action on this as long as it's specifically
Subject
subject to that agreement.
And this is exactly what we've been looking for a long time.
Right.
And I'm glad to see this process going through this and finally getting the first one to pioneer its way through, because it has been disheartening at times for me to vote a certain way, and so I'm glad that we have this process now in place so that we can address these things in an appropriate way.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the assessor also in doing this, and in fact, taking the lead even further at the request of the commission and the assessor, Representative Mark Roberts, in helping lead the charge to actually apply this fix that we believe helps the entire state at a legislative level.
Absolutely. Okay, seeing no further discussion on this, I'd entertain a motion.
Okay, I will move that we approve the property tax action with the amended changes, that we approve the request for 45,228,0028, stipulating to the refund amount of 1908.99. That we stipulate on 46,603,0012 that we abate the first and second penalties with the findings that it's in the best human interest and the interest of the county, and that we approve. I lost that number.
That's right here, I got it, it's.
46,603. I'm on the wrong one.
810-0200.
Yes. As it complies with our policy in Greenbelt.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 2 with the noted changes.
And that is subject to.
Oh,
a future-
sorry, and
Subject
subject to the letter for notice in their tax record.
The abatement deferral agreement.
Abatement deferral agreement in their tax record.
Perfect. I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 2 with the noted changes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion will carry 3-0. We'll now move to regular agenda item number 6 to approve or deny a late 2018 disabled veteran abatement. Gus Carlson.
I don't know if there's any questions
I
on
don't
this.
think any questions.
I'll make a motion that we approve the late abatement for veterans as is, it is the claimant's, that it is beyond the claimant's reasonable control, and to not extend the deadline would be against equity or good conscience.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 6. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion will carry 3-0. Next is regular agenda item number 7, which is similar.
I'll make a motion that we approve the late active duty armed forces abatement as stated in number 7, that it is, that the claimant to timely file this was beyond the claimant's reasonable control, and to not extend the deadline would be against equity or good conscience.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 7. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion will carry 3-0. Number 8 is similar.
I'll make a motion that we approve the late active duty armed forces tax abatement as stated in number 8, but the failure of the claimant to timely file was beyond the claimant's reasonable control, and to not extend the deadline would be against equity or good conscience.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 8. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion will carry 3-0. Next, regular agenda item number 9, which again is similar, veteran exemption.
I'll make a motion that we approve the late disability veterans exemption as stated in number 9, that the failure of the claimant to timely file was beyond the claimant's reasonable control, and to not extend the deadline would be against equity and good conscience.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 9. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion will carry 3-0. Up next is regular agenda item number 10. This is looking at an ordinance amendment to the Utah County Land Use Ordinance to include equine reproduction and/or rehabilitation facilities as permitted in the residential agricultural RA5 zone. Peggy, if you want to go ahead and brief us on this, and we'll go from there.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Peggy Kelsey from Community Development staff. This is an application that came to us by way of an applicant. He is requesting to add equine reproduction and or rehabilitation facilities in our land use ordinance. This would be a permitted use, which would be approved administratively after the application is submitted and certain conditions will be met. As you said, this will be in 3 of our zones, the RA5 zone, the M&G1 zone, and the G1 zone, grazing zone. The applicant, as I said, submitted his application. We reviewed it. We took his application and we actually did some modifications. Staff did some modifications to it. I believe we tried to capture everything that he had in his application. We just needed to rework that a little bit. So that we could regulate it and process the application in a more better and timely way. So what was changed, or what is proposed to be amended, is we added a couple of definitions to the land use ordinance for this use. We also put in some procedures in section 352 for the equine reproduction and rehabilitation facilities. This is our supplementary requirement section. That's what we would use to approve the application with. It includes site plan, it addresses parking, different types of the buildings that will be there, codes that they would have to meet, all building and fire and health codes. Also within this, we address lighting. They will be having a outdoor riding arena, and so we did address lighting. We also then, within the separate zones that I discussed, the RE5, M&G1, and grazing zone, we added that again as a permitted use. We listed area requirement and width requirement. Did go before the Planning Commission. They voted 6-0 to approve staff's recommendations. One thing that staff did.
Can I ask just a question on
Yes.
that? So they voted to approve 6-0 on this entire red line version?
Correct. Well, the first part of the red line is the applicant's
Right.
request. Okay, so it's the staff's request. Yes, they approved that. The one thing that we did bring up, this was after we had everything, the staff report and everything done. We got thinking about, there's always a possibility when somebody has a facility like this, we've added the ability with or without a dwelling to be on the property. In the future, if the applicant or somebody who purchases the property ever wanted to split that dwelling from the use, the way we have it situated right now, they actually would have to acquire additional property to be able to do that if they were using the minimum acreage. We did discuss it with Planning Commission. They still felt like that the red line version that staff submitted was what they wanted to recommend approval to you. So just wanted to bring that up. And I believe the applicant is here, so they can
Right.
address any questions you have.
Okay, perfect. Would the applicants like to speak to this?
I really don't have a lot to contribute other than to thank them for their work and answer any questions that you may have. I don't have a lot to.
Need to state your
Yeah,
name.
Oh, I'm
State your
sorry.
name for the record.
Chad Buse, Spanish Fork, Utah.
I don't actually have any
I
questions.
don't have any
Okay.
questions either.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
sounds good. Any additional public comment on this item? Seeing none, any?
I just would like to make a comment before I make a motion on this. I know we residents of the South County may pronounce things differently than others, but we do know how to spell. My guess is it should say equine reproduction, not reproduction. So I would hope we could amend that to properly address that. And then I will move that we approve the ordinance stated in number 10.
And I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 10. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion will carry 3-0. Next on our agenda is regular agenda item number 11. This is to look at an ordinance to amend Utah County zone map from the rural residential RR5 zone to the transitional residential TR5 zone for property located in sections 18 and 19 in the American Fork Pleasant Grove area. Bryce, you want to kick us off with this one?
Sure, Bryce Armstrong, Community Development. If you recall, Commissioners, last month, you referred an item to the Planning Commission through a work session process to take a look at all of our existing RR5 zone designations in the county. And so as part of that process, we held a work session with the Planning Commission in June, identified clusters, for lack of a better term, of these areas throughout the county, 5 or 6 of them. And the Planning Commission decided to address each one individually due to the unique natures of each area, with the mandate from the Commission to recommend potential amendment, abolishment, or adjustment of these zones, of these areas that are zoned the RR5 rural residential. So we've begun this process. The first two areas were held 2 weeks ago at the Planning Commission. This first one that's on your agenda today was recommended for approval to amend this area to the TR5 zone, transitional residential zone. In your agenda documents, I've included some general kind of quick fact information on this area. It's about 23 acres, 21 parcels, several of which are government-owned parcels, usually right-of-way parcels. The average parcel size of the private parcels works out to about 1.7 acres. I think there's about 9 homes on the parcels in that area. There are some existing islands. Most of these are 1 or 2 parcels that are surrounded by city. There's also some TR5 zone in the area, as you can see on one of your vicinity maps. The RR5 and TR5 zone are very similar. They're almost identical, other than one additional use being allowed in the TR5 zone, a produce stand. Their original intents were different when they first came to be in the 70s, but they've kind of morphed into almost an identical zone. They do have a different legislative intent. The TR5 zone are for areas that are anticipated to be annexed in the near future. It doesn't mean that this makes them annexed. That's a process that's independent of this process. All of these parcels do lie within either American Fork or Pleasant Grove's annexation policy declaration. There's a slide on there that kind of shows there's a slight little difference. There's one property that lies in both. So that's kind of a general summary. We did have a couple residents attend the Planning Commission meeting that were a little concerned about it. And so I don't know if they've come, but I think change, people are always a little leery of that. But in all reality, densities, the majority of the uses would remain the same.
So the only difference, well, the fruit stand that you mentioned,
Yeah.
the legislative intent, which is TR5 is usually a transitional zone, which, applies to more of annexation or allows for annexation. I don't know if it allows for it. It gives, that's what its intent is to transition to a different entity.
Sure, anticipate that, yep.
I'd be, if it looks like the TR5 allows for greater flexibility, I don't know if there are citizens here or not who would be against it. I'd like to hear what they'd have to say if they're against moving from the RR5 to the TR5. I would sure love to hear why.
Absolutely. So at this point, we will open this for public comment. Are there any members of the public here who would wish to address this issue?
Hey, Bryce, I have another question for you then. Part of, when we referred this back to the Planning Commission, it was to look at the RR5 zone, and one of the requests that we had was to even eliminate it. So in this case, if we're moving these properties from an RR5 to a TR5, we still could eliminate, because if we're doing it in little chunks, if we didn't, then we would, in essence, and then later on removed it, it would be kind of awkward, right? If we didn't pass something like this, and then later on we said we wanted to eliminate that zone from the county, it'd be kind of awkward. That's the only downsides, I think, with looking at them on little individual pieces, is that it starts to take off. If we leave a spot where there's RR5, it takes that option off from the Planning Commission's recommendation to us.
Yes, that is correct, and I know that they recognize that is on the table, and that may very well be an option. There were several planning commissioners that thought it may be appropriate in certain areas in the county that aren't in near proximity to a city to potentially retain RR5 zone, but I think that that is certainly on the agenda for, in their minds, to potentially eliminate this. And so this first one would accomplish that, this first area, because I think they're proposing to amend all of the areas in this area.
In this area.
Mr. Chairman, part of the reason why the Robert Morgan County Attorney's Office, part of the reason why the Planning Commission was looking at each one individually was because if you are going to eliminate those zones, this RR5 zone, the norm would go into is it CE1 or CE2? If you eliminate the zone, what would normally?
The CE1.
They would normally go to CE1, and so they were trying to determine what would be the appropriate zone for these different areas. And some of those areas were like Spanish Fork River bottoms. This area is mentioned, Spring Lake was another one, Alberta, and then there's a little piece up in Covered Bridge. So that's really your 5 or 6 different areas. And so they were gonna look at specific zones for each individual area, and that's why they took it a piece at a time.
That way, we could match it according to what the surrounding area looks
Correct,
like.
that's what they were looking to do, yes.
Makes sense.
And I think as in part of the work session process, we looked at each of those, and I think staff had a general recommendation of an existing zone that it could transition to if that was the desire.
Right.
Thank you. Any additional thoughts or comments?
Nope.
Being none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the ordinance to amend the official Utah County zone map as stated in number 11 on our regular agenda.
A second.
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 11. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion will carry 3-0. Next is number 12, to review and, look at review and acceptance of the proposed agreement with Vehicle Lighting Solutions. Commissioner Lee, you had a question on this one?
This one's should be simple. The name is incorrect on this, on the line. It has my name still on there as the chairman, needs to be changed.
And I've got the corrected ones here with Commissioner Ivy's name on it.
All right, I just saw it on there, just want to make sure that that's corrected.
Perfect. Looks like
I'll make-
Commissioner Graves had to step out, but I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we've reviewed and accept the proposal as an agreement with the vehicle lighting as stated in number 12, with the noted change of the name change from my name to your name as the chairman.
And with Commissioner Graves having to step out, I will second that motion. Suspending the rules will second that motion. I have a motion and a second to accept regular agenda item number 12. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye?
Motion will carry 2-0. I don't know how long he's going to be. He didn't mention anything. You wanna
I will make a recommendation that we take a 5-minute break.
recess?
How's that?
Yes, is that a motion for a 5-minute recess? I will second that. We have a motion and a second for a 5-minute, oh, maybe he's coming back. Yes,
Never mind, withdraw the motion.
motion will be withdrawn. We will now look to regular agenda item number 14. This is to adopt a resolution of the Board of Commissioners, Utah County, to oppose the creation of a Utah County Needle Exchange Program. Commissioner Lee, you've drafted this, and we'll turn some time to you.
Yes, we have had a lot of conversation on this, Commissioner Ivey and myself, with the opioid epidemic and so forth, and the town hall meetings that we've gone through. It has been one that I have kept my eyes on across the country and in other places to see, what benefit or negative consequences would come from a proposal like this, and I felt like with all the opportunity we have, especially with the opioid crisis, and for us to gear up together and move forward in a direction positive for the community, that this is something that I'd like to see taken off the table, so that we have a focus that would allow us to move forward with the things that I think we all agree on, where this one has some differing opinions. And so that's the reason why I put it forward. I put in there a lot of the whereases. Orange County was one that I just pulled up. There's many others, there are others, in which they recently had the program in place and decided not for us, pulled out, realizing that the programs are different across the country. I fully understand that, but in this case, they saw with the unanimous vote that this program would be detrimental to as they worked through it for years and pulled it back. And so that's the reason why I put this resolution on.
In addition, on that one, just adding to Orange County, actually just got reported last week, San Francisco also has this program. In additional cost to this program, it's reported they've now had to hire 10 additional people for $750,000 annually just to clean up the actual needles. So it's
Where was that published?
Fox News.
Because that's directly contrary to the National Institute of Health's findings, because the National Institute of Health finds that in San Francisco, 87% of needles are properly disposed of, and those cities are have 8 times less used needles than cities without them.
It was on Friday's Fox News report.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just interesting.
I don't always
that
believe what the
there's-
media tells me. I'm just saying it
there's-
was reported.
There's, contradictory studies on whether these things are effective or not. Part of the reason I like considering it is an option for me. I think and it needs to be, we look at places where it doesn't work and we say, why doesn't it work there? And how can we craft something that does work here? As we've mentioned in the town halls, for me personally, I'm a 1-for-1 exchange. Because that ensures that we're not adding needles to the community. In southern Indiana and in areas of Kentucky where they've instituted these problems, they've seen significant reduction in Hep C and HIV spread. So it's a harm reduction mechanism that has been proven successful when implemented properly. There's other areas where it's failed, and that's why I would oppose this, because I think it's something we keep on the table. And we look at, if it becomes proper, how do we craft it in a manner that would be appropriate? I'm sure there are additional people that would like to comment on this, so if there's, okay, here, we'll move that to public comment.
Chris Harrod, I'd like to stand and support the proposal and give you a practical example why we can debate the effectiveness of a program. There's no question, though, that when you start a program like that, drug use, the areas will shift. And you look at here in Provo, where we have, Mountain Land right across from an elementary school. You have what's happened in downtown Provo. But let me give you a practical example. A number of years ago, it's been over a decade, I was in Europe that has much more liberal exchange programs. And I was outside, we were walking in a park, and my 2.5-year-old came with a disposed needle and came up to me and said, Daddy, pokey. Now you can imagine trying to have a conversation with a 2-year-old, trying to figure if it looks pokey or it feels pokey, because there is a dramatic difference of what you're going to have to do with that child. And that's my great concern with programs like that these are not theoretical consequences that happen, is that you will change the traffic. I think that if we really want to do it, I think there's private organizations that would step up and do that and let them take the responsibility. But I never want to have one of my child have to go through that with one of my child and try to figure for the next half hour whether we needed to go in and have a number of tests done or it simply looked pokey. And so that's my concern. I think there are other areas that will step up if it really is truly shown to be protective. And so I would support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comment?
Richard Nance, Director of the Department of Drug and Alcohol Prevention and Treatment. First of all, I was surprised to see this. I didn't anticipate that you were going to put anything like this on the agenda. So that kind of bothered me a little bit. One of the things I did want to say, though, is we are not talking about county government establishing a needle exchange program. There are other not-for-profit entities, too, that I'm aware of in the state that are engaged in doing this. Salt Lake County has one, Tooele County has one, Weber County has one. I'm not sure about Davis County. Carbon County has one. So I would really be concerned, especially since we have one more town hall meeting coming up in September to discuss multiple options on how to deal with our opiate crisis, that this might just be a little premature till we finally get all of the final input from the community. I don't think it's wise for us to do anything that would discourage or tie our hands from looking at every option we've got available to deal with the opiate crisis that we're confronting. I think it may be a little premature to do this, and I would ask you to maybe table this until the beginning of October after we have that final town hall meeting. But we've done lots and lots of research in this. We wouldn't bring anything to you that wasn't suggested as a policy change that wasn't founded in sound science. If you look at all of the research, there are a lot of kind of fears that turn out to be unfounded in terms of what happens with needle exchange programs. Increased needles is not true. Increased drug abuse is not true. There are just a lot of unfounded fears that if you look at the science and the research, will kind of put your mind at ease in terms of what the results are of these things. So I'm not saying we want to do it. I don't want to stand in the way of others that might want to do it. I don't think we should be using taxpayer dollars to do this on county government time and effort, but I don't think we want to discourage others in case the problem we have now could get much worse. I just don't want to further down the road be in a position where we have to backtrack and change our position on what we think is the best public policy. I think we can prevent a bigger crisis by allowing these things to happen sort of organically by virtue of the not-for-profits that are doing it. Now, be that as it may, I know there are some issues around whether what we're doing is considered legal or not. We've been trying to solve the nation's drug problem with criminal justice policies since the 1970s, and it really hasn't worked. This is a public health problem, and we need to pursue solutions that are public health based. So that's why I would discourage you from passing this today, and let's consider it further and talk about it further. But bottom line is, I agree, Utah County government should not be the one that does this program.
Thank you. And I would concur with that. I think this is a nonprofit that runs this. I think we have a touch in directing what it looks like, though, and that's why I think our involvement's critical, and especially making sure we have a touch, because for me, the end goal of these things is to have people end up in treatment, to have them come there because they're looking for help, and to say, here's a therapist, here's a way into treatment, let's get you into treatment today, and get them off of the drugs completely. And it's one mechanism of many.
Yes. So before I make comment, I just want to ask Commissioner Lee, since you put this on the agenda, he made a request of tabling it. Are you interested in doing that, or should we?
No.
Okay.
No, and there's a couple of reasons. One, we've been going through some very productive town hall meetings on this opioid crisis. I have enjoyed them all the way up to one point where this comes out as an option, and then it turns, and I find it interesting that all the good work that we're putting into with the opioid crisis, whenever anybody comes to one of these town halls, at the very end, everything focuses on this issue. And I find it disheartening to a certain extent, because we've got so much work to do. We've got a mountain worth of work to do over here, and all these town halls have been focusing on this one issue, which we have controversy with and disagreement on. And so I would like to find a way that we could get this off the table, because I hear Richard say, let's leave all the options on the table. Well, some of all the options on the table are that we have nurses that sit there and do the injections. That's on the table too. And I think that we need to eliminate some of those things and get to the point to where we're actually doing productive things. I'm trying to stand with, there's two issues. There's a law enforcement issue, and I'm trying to stand with law enforcement with this. I don't know how law enforcement works this. We create it was proposed to us that this needle exchange program happened right over here in the Health and Justice Building. It's a county facility. I don't know how that would work. Would we create sanctuary areas in which you can come, and all of a sudden it's legal and not legal? And as soon as you walk out, when do you have drug paraphernalia? When does it become illegal? I worry about those kind of issues. I worry on a county standpoint on the liability issue. If you overdose on a county needle, do you not think that we're going to see a lawsuit? I think that's going to happen. I don't know where we go with these, and I don't know where the lines are. And so as I run down through it, I've been talking with law enforcement pretty extensively on it, up in Salt Lake with the DEA. With him, he tells me he sent people into their programs in Salt Lake. undercover officers to see what they could get without any exchange at all, and they walk out with a party pack. They called it a party pack. A bunch of needles, some condoms, some roaming alcohol, and they walk out with that. And that's what law enforcement is trying to deal with. So, yeah, we can say it's going to be a 1-for-1, and it would help in that area with some science. Yeah, and I totally believe that if you use a needle once and if somebody else uses it, but in the realities when I talk with law enforcement, they're telling me they're passing the needles around when they're there. It's not like a 1-for-1 where you use it and then you take it back and bring it over to Utah County and exchange it to get another one. And then I worry about it being a commodity, because if you've got a package of needles, you can use that as a commodity, and you can trade it for other things too, other activities. And so we're going to participate in that as a county government. I find that to be hard for me to go down that road. And so ultimately, I put this on because I'd like us to get to where we're actually focused on the areas that I think we can make a difference and plow together with the great opportunities that are before us. Great. I mean, they're sad. The opioid crisis is a major crisis, and there's a lot of work to be done there. And I hate to be sidetracked and diverted with other things that are going on right now that we have probably a lot of controversy in our communities about.
Go ahead. Go ahead. For me, there are two issues. It's not that potentially I can't see where this could be an option in the future. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to go into that. But for me, it's always been in the community's best interest. And again, this is my opinion, that treatment and prevention is the best way to help these people. And I've experienced this in my family. I've seen these things. And so to me, if any private money, taxpayer dollars are going to be expended, I would hope we would focus more on the treatment and the prevention and the education first and try that route. And so the other thing that is concerning, and it gets used, and again, national numbers and national stories are just that. They're national, and they take this whatever. But as a member of the Board of Health, and every year the Utah County Health Department publishes the stats for Utah County. In the opioid crisis, we talk about needles being exchanged, and all of a sudden we have this big outbreak of hepatitis C, or we have an outbreak of all of these diseases. I'm 100% certain that if you go and actually review the Utah County Department of Health's annual findings for Utah County, it doesn't even reach the level of 0.05% of our county residents that have any of these diseases that are currently being talked about transferred through needles. So at this point, that's why I think any discussion of needle exchange in that regard is definitely premature. That's why I think our focus before that does become an epidemic is better served by talking about prevention, education, and treatment. For me, that's the best. In also addressing Commissioner Lee's point, quite honestly, based on Sheriff Tracy and what I've gotten to know, I would actually fully expect the deputies to stand right outside a needle exchange and haul them off to jail, because he believes in enforcing the law. That's why he's been the elected sheriff for many years. So those are just my thoughts.
Fair enough. So I think this is an avenue to treatment. I think this is absolutely scientifically grounded as an avenue for prevention, because it prevents communicable diseases in the areas that it's happened. That's why I support it. Obviously, I'm going to be in the minority here, but it's okay. Is there any additional public comment? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the resolution as stated in number 14 on our regular agenda.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution as stated in number 14. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, aye. Motion will carry 2-1. Next on our agenda, we have a look at the adoption of a resolution which allows each Utah County Commissioner to perform their elected and sworn duties as prescribed by Utah state law. Commissioner Graves has put this resolution on and will allow you to introduce it.
Yeah, so the public document that I put on there, it's a resolution waiving the attorney-client privilege for each Utah County Commissioner, specifically and individually as prescribed under State Code 1753-106, and allow the Utah County Board of Commissioners to act as the authority for Utah County residents as duly elected. I believe that there
that within the civil division, who tells us when we first come into office, and they're right, we are here to work for you. So in other words, if I need an ordinance looked at or explained, they're very good. We go to them and they help us. It's my belief that at times, for many reasons, information is withheld from a commissioner, or the process isn't followed all the way through, preventing a particular commissioner to perform their duties fully as they intend to do. So I do have a statement, but I will defer, only read that if I feel it becomes necessary.
Okay. Commissioner Lee, any comments or thoughts?
I don't know where to start with this for sure and how to work it through. As I read down through this, there's, well, let's just put it all out there on the table, right? I'm being personally sued 3 times. Once by Orem City, once by Provo, or I should say, I don't know if that's the correct word, sued or whatever the case
In
may
those 2
be.
cases, it is.
So I'm being sued, and then I also have a claim personally against me from Commissioner Graves. So I'm the only commissioner up here with 3 that I know of. I don't know if any of the other commissioners have more than that. I think there's 1 with 2 and 1 with 1, if I'm correct in that. Is that accurate?
No, 3, 2, and 2.
Where's my second?
Well, let's not discuss it
Okay,
publicly. Because they are
Okay.
legal matters.
So anyway, I'm looking at this, and as I read down through this, the thing that gives me pause with this, great pause, is that it looks, and I agree, Commissioner, with you, that a commissioner, to do their duties and their responsibilities, needs to have information and all the information. Totally agree with that, and I hope you know that. I think you know that. What gives me pause with this resolution is that it is taking away an attorney-client privilege in which I don't want to do that. I don't want to take away an attorney-client privilege that I have on a personal basis. That to me gives me great pause, because why in the world would I want to give that away?
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, and I'm not asking, I don't think the commission should release a personal attorney-client privilege. I think we should only do it when pertaining to the business of the county as a commissioner. I do not believe that either of you need my permission to go and ask for anything that pertains to the business of the county, period. I just think that each commissioner should be allowed to do, under the law 1753-106, and where a county legislative body each may examine and audit all the accounts, blah, 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 may investigate any matter pertaining to a county officer or the county, its business or affairs. And so that's how this, it may be not worded properly for that, and may need additional, work in that regard, but
So I see
that's
that.
the intent.
Okay, so that, I guess, that one first, it was a major red flag for me. I agree that the legislative body has the ability to waive we hold the privilege.
Right.
I mean, the commission. When I say we, I'm saying the commission holds the privilege of the attorney-client privilege. If we want to waive that, meaning we,
Right.
then we can. We can say we're not going to hold that attorney-client privilege, and we're going to release documents.
Can
But again,
can I
it's a
take
we.
that one step further?
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
are also the only ones that can assert the attorney-client privilege. My concern is that when a commissioner goes and we are told, well, that's privilege, you guys aren't entitled to it, or we're stopped, you've specifically asked for stuff that you've been denied or told to deny, and we have to go through battles. I've had the same experience, and we've gone through that.
Right.
That's my concern here.
Okay.
And again,
So I agree with those. I think the way this is worded, I would be in favor of either striking this or doing something, because the wording on this here gives me some major pause.
Okay.
As I read down through it. I can't give up the attorney-client privilege with it. Some of the other areas, I think that we're discussing right here, I totally agree with. I think we already have them, so I don't know why we need to put them in a resolution, but,
well, I'll read my statement and let you understand how
Okay.
and why this came then. I apologize, so I'm going to read my statement in its entirety, and let me give a little background. I had a different resolution previously. Jeff Buman, the county attorney, Dave Shawcroft, civil division attorney, and Rob Moore, we all met. That resolution, they asked me to wait because they were out of town. I complied with their request. This was a different one that popped up because of some issues that I will point out. I apologize that I have waited this long into my term to do what I promised the citizens of Utah County. I have continually watched individuals within the Attorney's Department denigrate some citizens and members of the commission office within the county rather than sticking with the simple rules that should guide the entire office of justice is blind. This statement is an attempt to right wrongs which have been placed on the residents of Utah County that have not allowed the Board of Commissioners to perform their elected and constitutional duties. One of the greatest offenses in my time as a Utah County Commissioner happened within the last 4 days and subsequently was also brought up today. I realize now that it is time to speak out and create change when certain things are said to members of the Board of Utah County Commissioners. An attorney walks into my office and asks me what this resolution on the agenda was about. I'd already informed the Civil Division of the intent, and they had received a copy of it. This attorney then said to me when I asked certain questions of why we would prevent this, his answer was, "We don't want you or others out there to know our playbook." Those that followed the Graham appeal today heard that again. Last time I checked, the playbook for the government is the Constitution and a transparent government of a free people. By withholding any information from a member of the legislative body, not allowing full and unfettered access to all information within that jurisdiction, it is my belief that this constitutes a violation of law and prohibits the member of that body to fulfill their sworn oath of office. This also prohibits their ability to fully defend the constitutional rights of the people. It is very convenient for the Utah County Attorney's Office to exert or claim privilege over the Board of Utah County Commissioners. Privilege is something that only the client in that relationship holds. An attorney can never claim privilege over a client. The clients for Utah County are only the 3 duly elected representatives. There are no circumstances under the law which dispute that fact. It is a tremendous injustice to the residents of Utah County that they are not allowed to have their duly elected representatives be completely transparent and open with them, since the board is selectively given information even when requested. The information is sometimes given to 1 or 2 on the board and not all members equally. By the actions of the attorneys within the Civil Division of the Utah County Attorney's Office, the 3-member Board of Commissioners for Utah County are not allowed to protect and prevent the county from future litigation. In fact, from the lack of transparency from within the Civil Division to the Commission Office, it often creates more risk and litigation, therefore increasing the cost to each resident. All of the following cases in which this resolution was written to protect all deal with the Civil Division. Number 1, the attorneys are often approached from department heads within the county as to matters for closed meetings pertaining to land deals, HR issues, and litigation. Decision on holding and presenting this information to the board is done without the knowledge of the portfolio commissioner, which has been designated by the Board of Commissioners. The board has set this policy internally and informed the Civil Division of the closed meeting process, and it is still not being followed to the full request of the commission. Number 2, the attorneys use the threat of potential litigation and tactics of fears bordering on bullying to intimidate the commissioners from performing their professional duties as outlined by 17-53 of the Utah State Code. The attorneys approach commissioners after agenda items are published and tell the commissioner how to proceed by using any means necessary while telling the commissioners that they cannot communicate with anyone about those agenda items. Yet the Civil Division works and is under the Utah County Commission for all matters pertaining to the county commission meetings and its records for these matters. They provide their legal opinion, masking them in Utah County legal opinions, although no legal opinion was requested by any member of the board. Number 3, they recommend courses of actions to department heads without consulting the Board of Commissioners. These recommended courses are outside the scope of their duties within the office and are, in fact, the duties of the board under the law, specifically referring to recommendations made to the Utah County Sheriff's Office, Clerk Auditor, Treasurer, Public Works, and Human Resources, which have all approached the Board of Commissioners with such concerns over the past 3 years. Number 4, these attorneys created due process laws and ordinances during and after the issues were already raised. These laws are not necessary since Utah state laws already handle these issues. Then they tell the board that they must pass this law after the fact because it fixes a wrong in the state code, and then force votes after commissioners recuse themselves from the vote. Commissioners ask them how this can be done and believe that it is in fact a violation of law to pass such an ordinance. This action was promptly followed by lawsuits filed by Provo and Orem City for violations of due process and constitutional violations. Number 5, then more offensive violations of due process happen during internal matters. When the commissioner's closed session recordings can prove someone's actions and provide further detail to other public documents, the county withholds these recordings and does not allow the public to be informed of all of the facts. They claim privilege on those recordings and allow the material that serves their department's best interest to become the public's documents, consequently allowing individuals to face unnecessary consequences imposed on them at post or other places by withholding all pertinent information or claiming privilege. If the privilege claim does not work, then the Civil Division claims it is work product or drafts to prevent embarrassment for violations that Utah County has impugned on individuals. Work product in non-criminal cases can only be something requested by the Utah County Commissioners. Number 6, the most offensive claim of privilege comes when grammar requests or requests made from a commissioner within a commissioner's professional duties are denied because of claimed potential or threats of potential future actions that could harm the county because of violations that we choose to hide. As a commission, we often agree to allow information to be released, and we are told that we do not have that authority. Then when we raise the issue, we are told to hold off and wait and let us take care of it internally. This was again done yesterday on a simple request from the Salt Lake Tribune for information pertaining to the UTA board appointments, which are and should be a public process as defined by SB 136. It is ironic that in using a defense of privilege, the Civil Division Office violates the declared privilege by disclosing orally what documents and information exist to that commissioner who they claim the privilege on. This is done without consulting any members of the Board of Commissioners. By disclosing the mere mention of such materials, the privilege has already been violated and no such claim can exist. However, the request of commissioners still go ignored. The ethical dilemma claim arises from the office when only ethical dilemma is their violation of that privilege. Further examples illustrating non-disclosure. When the BRT board was created, the Civil Division participated in drafting and or reviewing the governing bylaws in which the project funds that the commission is elected to oversee are expended on that project. The agreement was drafted and the designated vote and power from the commission was given to that board, and a half vote was granted the commission chair of Utah County without consulting Commissioner Bill Lee and approving the agreement on the commission agenda. The decision and legal opinions for presenting Proposition 1 on the ballot were also held from Commissioner Lee. He was given a very short time to respond and write the legally mandated opposition piece required for the balance of the ballot proposition that was outlined by the legislature. Meetings were held without his knowledge to further this item. There are many more instances that affect all of the Board of Commissioners, which I shall share should it become necessary. That is why I drafted this resolution, the current form in which it is. Renee, for the record. So, and I am willing to consent to either striking or continuing for fixing the issues which I've raised, understanding the personal attorney-client privilege.
What would you prefer?
I don't care. Either one works. To me, they're the same process.
If we strike it, then it can come back when it's ready
Absolutely.
to continue, then it puts it in.
And if
motion.
we strike it, it gives each commissioner the ability to maybe draft their own wording. So I'm okay with that.
I'll make a motion then that we strike number 15 from our regular agenda.
And I will second.
A motion and a second to strike regular agenda item number 15. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion will carry 3-0. Next, we have regular agenda item number 19. This is
Yeah.
the agreement with Rural Utah Alliance.
The question I have on this one, with any of these agreements that we use that are kind of outside of normal, I don't know, normal, whatever, that we agree to, and I agree with what they have, but I have not seen, a documented what they have done for us. And so I would think that it would be advantageous to see that before we proceed.
Right.
So that
Yep.
we know that we're moving in a correct direction and we know what we're getting for this membership.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need a report because we did join this for a very
For,
appropriate
for,
cause.
for a reason.
And let's find out where they're at. So do we want to continue this
So
item?
I would say that maybe it might be better that we, I don't know if we continue or strike. I mean,
Continue
We
until August
continue
28th?
2
That gives
weeks.
us a month to find out the
Is
answers.
that,
Yeah,
okay.
that works.
I'll make a motion that we continue this. Is it August 28th, 27th, 28th?
Well, if we have one on the 21st, it has to be the 28th.
The 28th. I'll move that we continue this till August 28th, 2018.
Whoops. Didn't find their appointment then.
Second.
Sorry about that. I have a motion and a second to continue regular agenda item number 19 until August 28th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion will carry 3-0.
Mr.
Next,
Chairman, let me ask, are you looking for a presentation from this body in your commission meeting, or are you looking for just a letter? What are you looking for?
A letter of update.
I would just like to have a letter of just documented what they've done for Utah County or for us specifically for our
Do
membership.
you want
there.
our office to reach out to them, or did you want to reach out to them and ask for that
I don't know
information?
if I've got the contact for
I
that.
have the contact.
You have it?
Did
What would you prefer
I'll take
then?
care of that.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda, we have regular agenda item number 20 to approve and authorize the commission chair to sign an economic development consultant agreement. Commissioner Graves, I believe you had some questions on this one?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't me that held it.
Oh, okay.
So, I did raise this when we first started this.
I'm sorry.
So, this agreement today, we did receive some insurance.
That's right.
Let me pull it up real quick. Under this agreement, the insurance required is $2.5 million per occurrence. We received certificate of liability insurance in the amount of $2 million per occurrence. And so, I'm looking for direction. Did you want me to go back and request the full 2.5? Or do
I
you?
think I already stipulated that I'd like to see it at 2.5.
Yeah, so.
It's 2.5 because that's consistent with all of the other.
Yeah, and
agreements
we'll
we
do
have.
that. And yeah, and that's the comment I wanted to raise was we stopped a charity fundraiser.
Yeah.
Because of that same thing, so.
Great, we'll do that.
Okay, so I would anticipate then this will need continued.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we continue this to, when do you want to continue it to?
August 21st, did
August
that give you enough
21st?
time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we continue.
The other
item-
option is, just so you know, the language of the contract says 2.5. So you
Right.
could approve it, subject to they providing that insurance, but that's up to you.
I would be fine.
Yeah,
Then it's done.
Because the language of the
Why
contract
don't we
actually
just
says
approve it?
2.5.
Then it's
Let's just,
done.
I'll make a motion then that we approve and authorize the commission chair to sign the economic development agreement as stated in number 20.
second?
Motion and second to approve regular agenda item number 20. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion will carry 3-0. We will need closed meetings 21, 23, and 24.
Okay.
I'll just-
A motion to approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, water rights, or water shares for today's date at this location following the completion of regular agenda and work session items.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 21. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion will carry 3-0.
Motion to strike 22.
Second?
Motion and a second to strike regular agenda item number 22. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion will carry 3-0.
Motion to approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual or individuals for today's date at this location following the completion of regular agenda and work session items.
Second?
Motion and second to approve regular agenda item number 23. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I would-
Motion carries 3-0.
I'd make a request of the commission if it be okay. Traditionally, after closed sessions, we do not go back live on YouTube, and I think because of the tabled issues, we probably
We
should request of IT that request for.
Yes. Because we will have items to pull from that have been tabled.
Okay. I then will make a motion to set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation for today's date, this location following the completion of regular agenda items and work session items.
Second.
Motion and second to approve regular agenda item number 24. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion will carry 3-0. We now have 2 work session presentations. The first is a fourth quarter cent sales tax presentation by Andrew Jackson and Matt Dugdale. Andrew and Matt.
Commissioners, I'm sure, yeah, no problem. There's some vegetables here.
You're fine with this being a public document?
Oh, yeah, it's all public document.
I say it better because my request was that they understand everything is public.
I just want to make sure and ask that question.
Yes. I was gonna say, because I have emails stating that. Which they, by the way, they didn't dispute. Oops, that was me.
My name is Andrew Jackson. I'm the Executive Director of Mountain Land Association of Governments, and I'm also, until on or before November 1st, I'm a UTA Board of Trustees member. I sent you an email with the PowerPoint presentation. I'll go over it just because it helps me to have a good outline. And then I've got follow-up documentation, and I can get all of that electronically to Renee to be posted. It's all public information. On this PowerPoint then, if you want to, we can talk about that. There's some things in there that are just for reference material that I won't be talking about today, but I've got it there. If you want to talk about that, we can go back to that page and discuss it and have that information, but that's not what I'm trying to talk about at this point. It doesn't matter. I emailed it out to the county commissioners. I don't know if they can email it to you or whatever, but it doesn't.
Oh.
I'm going to skip through a bunch of the pages. So, but just on this second page, it just identifies what is projected, and this was based off of the county budget for this most current budget that projects that a quarter-cent sales tax would generate about $22.2 million. And then I also identifies the percent of sales per community as well as what those total sales will be. Obviously, this is looking back at percentages, and we'll have those exact numbers after we get the sales tax that's paid on that. The next slide just goes over the 3/4 cents, and if anybody wants me to go into more detail on those, I can, but with the interest of time, we won't do that. The next slide shows that 8 options to get 4 quarters plus a 20th. And you can see that in 5912 is a section of the state code that deals with the transportation quarter cents. And the ones in bold on the left, 2213, 2216, and 2218 are the ones that have been adopted within Utah County. And then the 4th quarter, 5912, 2219 was modified this last legislative session in the Transportation Governance Bill that dealt with governance of UTA. It also modified these quarter cents and put some dates on them when certain actions can be taken. The 5912, 2219, the first option associated with that has 40% of that quarter going to UTA, 40% going to cities, towns, and county, and 20% going to the county, must be adopted by June 30th of 2022, or by state law that provision goes away. There have been some previous discussions in legislation, previous draft legislations, or I guess substitute bills that indicated that the state would enact that. If the counties didn't enact it by 2022, that was not adopted. That was in a previous draft of the bill. Further, with the 4th quarter, if the county does not adopt it by June 30th of 2020, then a city option goes into effect where it can be adopted city by city, town by town, with 50% going to the transit agency and 50% is going to the cities and towns, again, if the county doesn't adopt it. Let's say, for instance, a city does adopt it July 1 of 2020, a couple of those cities do, and then the county decides to adopt it countywide after that, because you still have until 2022 to adopt it. The split of the 40-40-20 would only be on those communities that had not previously adopted it city by city. So if Provo and Orem adopt it, it stays at that 50-50 split. Then also, if a county has all 4 quarters adopted, then you can go and adopt a 5th 20th. So 2019 also allows a 5th 20th, and in that instance, on that 5th 20th, 100% of that funding would go to the county for transit purposes. We can skip through the next couple of slides where it talks about the first quarter and second quarter and third quarter. We've gone over that many times. And get to this slide here that shows the fourth quarter and the 2 options on the funding available. So again, it shows total sales generated by community, including the unincorporated area, 40% of that going to the cities, towns, and the county, which is about 8.8 million total, 8.8 million going to UTA, and then of the 20% of that, 4.4 million going to the county. Now, of note here is that additionally, the legislature changed 5912-2219 to say that after May 8th of 2018, which was the effective date of that section of code, if a county adopted it, the fourth quarter, they would get 100% of that funding up until June 30th of 2019. So if you adopted a full year ahead of time, you get that full year funding, maybe $22 million. If you adopt it the month before, in May, then you would get that 1 month, somewhere in the proximity of just under $2 million. That goes solely to the county to be used for transportation purposes into your transportation account directly from the tax commission. Be aware, though, that there's a requirement that there's about, after it's enacted and put in place, there's about a 3-month period before the tax commission can actually start and have that tax actually be collected. It takes about a 3-month period. So, and I think they only do that on a quarterly basis. So it's a January, January, April, January, March, June, and October that they would look at that. So again, there would be some lag time additionally associated with that. And then you have that second option, which shows how it gets split if the county does not adopt it and it goes city by city and town by town. The next slide shows that there is a non-binding opinion question that will be on the ballot in November through the state legislature. You're familiar with the Our Schools Now project, and they had petitions to put a ballot measure to increase income tax for schools. And they worked out a deal with the legislature that instead what they would do is they would increase the gasoline tax 10 cents per gallon, which is about a 34% increase in the gasoline tax. 70% of that increase goes to the state for state roads. 30% goes to cities, towns, and counties for their B and C road fund. 70% goes to the A road fund, which is for the state. That 70% of that increase goes into UDOT's funding, and a dollar for dollar amount comes out of general fund expenditures. Right now we have about 20% of the general fund sales tax goes to UDOT for transportation purposes. What they will do is they will take dollar for dollar of that increase that they get for the gasoline tax and move that sales tax over into education. And again, that goes in November as a non-binding vote on an increase in the gasoline tax. The important point on this is that that only deals with the 70% of that increase. The 30% that goes to B and C road funds, B being county road funds and C being city road funds, that would increase the B and C road fund allocation about 34%. And so you can see identified here, I just did a rough and dirty 30% increase. Again, these are just universe numbers, not exact numbers on those. If you go to the next chart, and you have a bigger copy of this one, this shows the funding for the BRT project. So first, and this was done in 2014, so the numbers aren't exact. This spreadsheet has the exact numbers on it. However, in 2014, there was an expenditure of third quarter cent funding of $2.8 million for design costs for the BRT project so that we could get it to 80% design so then we could go out to bid. So keep that in mind that there was a payment for design costs of $2.8 million in 2014 out of the third quarter. There is an interlocal agreement between UTA and the county that UTA will pay back that $2.8 million out of first quarter cent sales tax. Additionally, there is a second interlocal agreement that covers this area that's in the blue, which is that Utah County out of the third quarter would pay operations and maintenance and debt service on the bond for BRT out of the third quarter. And then in 2028, UTA would take out a bond, pay back in a lump sum the money that had been spent on operations and maintenance and principal and interest payments. And then they would take over after 2028 the expense for operations, maintenance, bond payments, and then again they have this where they would be monetizing over time that lump sum payment. Again, these numbers were just kind of ballpark numbers that we were looking at. This is the actual numbers that we're looking at, but it does not include that 2.8. So you want to write the 2.8 million on this sheet to make sure that you understand that it should include that 2.8 million. Now is when we have what I think is the difference maker. So you can see the bond payments on the next sheet, and I'll let Mr. Dugdale talk about that. But this that shows the possible use of UTA 40% fourth quarter funding. There's a lot of discussion when the fourth quarter proposal of Prop 1 failed.
What sheet are you on?
This one, it says possible use.
Oh, okay, inside that packet.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it's the second to the last page in there. Possible use of the UTA 40% fourth quarter. There's a lot of discussion when Prop 1 failed that it failed because of UTA. I don't know if that's a correct statement or not because we also had American Fork and some other communities had road bonds that also failed at that same time. But definitely I believe there was at least, if not it failed because of UTA, that there was a drag because of the UTA portion. A lot of people felt that they didn't want to put additional money into UTA until things got changed around. What this does, we have a proposal for an additional third interlocal agreement between UTA and Utah County. So the first two stay in place, but the third then becomes an additional agreement to that. And if I'll just go through these A through F. So first off, in the interlocal agreement, which I sent out to you by email on Thursday afternoon. So first off, again, we're getting about 8.8 million and we have a commitment of somewhere around 6 million out of the third quarter. So the fourth quarter generated about 8.8 million in the 40% for UTA. First thing that would go towards is future bond payments. So as soon as UTA starts getting money in, which would be sometime in 2019, the county enacts it, the county gets that first year of funding, and then in 2019, then money would start to flow to UTA. So they would start taking over that bond payment in 2020. If they still have money left over after making that bond payment of approximately 3.3 million, again, we're getting 8.8 million. The next thing that they would do is they would pay for future O&M costs associated with that. And that's projected to be about 2.6 million.
Can I ask you to clarify? I thought
Sure.
you just said if they have additional monies, they would then cover the O&M.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
but
here's
the number you said was 8.8 million in collection,
Right.
debt service of 3.3.
Yep. So here's
My
the
math's
thing.
not great, but that's 5.5 million.
Yep. So we have an unknown, and we have alien zombie invasion of the Earth, and we're out eating our domesticated animals and all that kind of stuff to survive. And we
Which
turn
is why
into
the
hunter
legislature set up a new board for UTA to prevent that.
Well, I don't think it can prevent an alien invasion, but what they're saying
These
is
guys are good.
we really believe, and it's going to be based off those actuals that come in. So we're expecting it to be that it's going to be that 8.8, but nobody can guarantee that it's going to be 8.8. But it comes off of what the county
Sure,
had.
but in the last
proposed.
15 years, it's never been below $6.5 million.
Exactly. Yep.
So
We feel
5.9 in total. That,
Yeah.
okay.
So they'll start paying off the future bond, they start paying future O&M from that current year. Then they will go back and start paying on the bond payments, pay the past O&M, and then they will also do a reimbursement of that time value of money for the interest accrued on that lost value of so you do that net present value of the past expenses. However, I believe that in this, probably either in C or D, you have to add in that 2.8 million. I think that there's been some change, a lot of change in the county, in the UTA attorney's office. And I think that the attorney that drafted this wasn't aware that there is that interlocal agreement on the 2.8. So that 2.8 needs to be added in either in C or D on there. And then after all of that is done, then there would be the opportunity, and we can determine if it's a county commission that decides that if you enact a tax, if there would be value in future transit service. However, let's go to this.
Oh, hold on, I want to
Sure.
address one more thing you said. Because we glossed over it like it's not important. We just said that the attorneys aren't familiar with the $2.8 million interlocal agreement. That's a little concerning to me, because those can only be approved by the three of us.
Yeah, so it was the drafting attorney at UTA. He was in a different area. The person who was over these interlocal agreements is no longer with UTA. So we were getting this really quick over the holiday weekend. And so I think he was only familiar with the first agreement and wasn't just in a quick blush familiar with the second. So I want to make sure that that both of those agreements are included in this third interlocal agreement. So I just want to make people aware that in addition to the bond and on it, there was that 2.8 in design that UTA has agreed to pay back out of either the first or second quarter cent. So when we look at those numbers and we start getting into 2019 or 2020, that they start making that $6 million payment and they've got $2.8 million left over, that 2.8 starts going back to first, if you want, the 2.8 that was paid in 2014. And then the next year you've got 6 million, but you're gonna have 2.8 million extra left over. So that starts whittling away the 3.3 million that was paid in 2017. And then 2022, again, 6 million, you think maybe you're up to 3 million more extra. And so that starts hitting that next million in 2017 and 2018. And so you're gonna be seeing how this is written, that for probably up until somewhere in the 2025, 2026 range, 100% of that UTA portion is going to go to pay back the third quarter cent. We're looking at close to $9 million a year that would be going into that third quarter cent. We budget that over a 2-year period to do our tip selection, so you'd be looking at close to $18 million in funding, new funding associated with the fourth quarter paying back that third quarter on a every 2-year basis, you know, 9 million a year. And so that adds additional 9 million to road funding. And so a lot of people said that they had some concerns with a new quarter cent going to UTA. With this agreement, that wouldn't be the case. New funding would go into the third quarter cent, which, well, actually would free up the third quarter cent, which then could be spent on those road projects. I've talked with...
It still gives UTA the autonomy over the fourth quarter cent money.
No, because by interlocal agreement, they're obligated to cover these responsibilities. So if you pass an interlocal agreement, UTA agrees that any of that additional money goes to these things in these categories.
Until it's paid off. And then they have control over it.
Yes.
That's what
Well,
you're
but-
going at. Yeah.
But then after it's paid off, they still have significant debt associated with that. So we're talking 2039.
Well, so, and I'm glad you did cover it. The important part that you said just a minute ago for the public, the benefit for the first part of this from the UTA portion is it does free up roughly $9 million that go to direct local projects. That's a good thing because we need the all. The thing that concerns me with that math is, again, having sat through the final phases of this, we were always told, and Commissioner Lee and I actually had a lot of discussions about this a couple years ago, that UTA has a great history of coming under budget, and because of these projects, they anticipate paying this off early anyway. That was with current funding. That was before fourth quarter was even talked about. And by what you just said is by enacting the fourth quarter, they will definitely plan on paying this off by 2024, 2025, which was already their plan.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I appreciate that. So what they were saying was in 2024, they could start making the bond payment. They expected that they would have revenue to start making the bond payment in 2024, but not making the actual purchase of those past payments until sometime in 2028.
Which they'd have to go out and get their own bond.
As it's written now, they could, though.
Means they bond
Well,
against
yeah,
the-
so
or
yeah,
they
because
bond against the
yeah,
fourth
because
quarter.
the bond has a balloon payment. So right, the bond that the county has, and Mr. Dugdale can talk about that. I think it goes to 2029. I think they added an extra year there, and then they have the balloon payment. So yeah, unless they had 46 million in cash, they would have to go out and do another bond to do that. Let's see. So again, we'd be looking at additional funding for those roads over that given period of time until those expenses are paid back. So it gets you the road money at a quicker period of time. We did do discussions. Okay, so I've talked with legislators associated with this because there was some discussion with previous legislators not in our county that wanted the fourth quarter to go to new service. That's not in legislation. So it's okay to do it by the 59-12-22-19. There's no requirement that it goes to new service, the UTA's portion. So I've talked with legislators, and those who were wanting that, who weren't from our county will no longer be in the legislature. I've talked to the sponsors of the SB 136 bill, and they felt it was a good idea to get that debt reduction in there. They understood the need to reduce that debt. I've talked with some of the current UTA trustees as well as myself, and feel that getting out of that debt would be a better use for UTA's portion of the fourth quarter than it would be to just provide new service and wait until 2028 to refinance that bond. We talked with mayors. At Commissioner Graves' request, sent out a questionnaire to mayors to see their support for option 1, the county enacting it, or option 2, the cities and towns enacting it, or neither option. It wasn't discussed with them because we didn't have that draft agreement until Thursday night. But we will bring it up at our regional planning meeting that there is this possibility, if we work things out to satisfaction, that that fourth quarter could be used for BRT, and that frees up that third quarter. So
You're
without,
talking about our meeting on August 2nd.
yes, without knowing.
I do plan, just to let the commission know, I plan on making that document part of this process and public.
Yeah.
I think that should be.
Yep. So with mayors not knowing that the fourth quarter was in play to pay off the third quarter debt, because we had a few people that said they weren't interested in it because it gave more money to UTA. Well, I guess over a long period of time, but in the shorter term of, at least within my career, the money would all be spent within, for BRT, which frees up that third quarter cent funding for roads. We had 11 that were in favor of option one of the county enacting it. We had 8 that were in favor of the cities and towns enacting it. We had 2 that weren't in favor of any tax. And then we had a few that we didn't get back from. So,
I gotta make mention of that survey. The only problem with a survey like that is you give them 2 options. And to me, an option like that sounds like, do you wanna get hit by a sledgehammer over the head, or do you wanna get shot by a gun? And so there's more to the story than that. There's a lot more that can be said on that option. I had a mayor call me up and said, golly, I'm trying to pick the least favorite.
least dirty shirt, yeah. And so I think that's a great point that you make. This is a very complex issue, and there's a lot of things that are involved in it. And I think that's one of the reasons why the legislature, when they changed this last year, they neither require nor prohibit going to a vote of the public, but they actually allow elected officials to make that decision. And so we have the elected officials, they spend that time, they can spend that time on this very complex issue and look at that and decide if this is a good thing to do or not.
Yeah.
And
No,
so,
I gotta address that too, because
me
this
too.
is, so in essence, as I read down through this interlocal agreement.
and it's a
that,
draft.
The draft that you put forward, which comes pretty heavily UTA slanted. When I look at it, there's a statement in there that says, once enacted on this, the county must, I don't know if it's must, shall, whatever, impose this in 30 days. It doesn't even give that option. It doesn't even allow for an option for us to go to the people on this for a vote. And so in essence, and this is where some of the mayors are having some concern, at least the ones that called me, is that, and I personally, is that I look at this and I say, okay, we're gonna impose this thing, and if we impose this thing, we're going over the vote of the people, which is the sovereign, which I find completely ironic when we hold up 2006 and say the people voted on this thing, we hold this so dear, and then all of a sudden the people voted on this thing, oh no, you know what? We're just gonna shove that out the door. We're gonna shove that out the door, and we're gonna use a bribe, and I'll use the word strong, a bribe. $22 million. You guys, Utah County, you guys can get $22 million out of this bribe. And we can go ahead and just go over the top of the people on this that we represent and impose this fourth quarter cent sales tax. Now, I've got a lot more to say when it comes to what I think the options are, because I think responsible taxation is what we're looking at and what we're trying to do, but I want to do it along with the people, and I want to do it in a responsible way that we set out to do with the goals intact, and that is have local control over this 40%. And I'm not going to succumb to this bribe thing of, hey, you're going to get $22 million with it, and I want it to go off and pay off debt all the way through before it comes back to us, and then I want to continue to have administrative overlook and see and control when it comes to that. I don't see that in this. I do have a substitute that I'd like to give to all the commissioners, just from me on it, but anyway.
So
Yeah, so those are great points. And
but I
think,
want to address it too.
Yeah, sure, go
And
ahead.
just for clarification, I believe Commissioner Lee meant to talk about the 2016 vote of the people, not 2006. right? The,
No, when we talk about the second quarter cent sales
okay,
tax,
second quarter.
we always hold that up, the second quarter, and
Right.
we say, look at what we got
I didn't know
with
if you were
this, the
referring to
people-
Prop 1 in that too.
Yeah, well, that's.
So
yeah.
to me, this is not a complex issue. The law may be complex, but this is not a complex issue for the people, which we represent. I have never had one mayor, one citizen, and come up and say, yeah, I fully supported this bill. I love everything about it. Every person, 100%, so statistically I have to go with it, have all said, yeah, I support giving money to local for roads, but I do not support one dime going to UTA until they're accountable and quit wasting money. That's the comments that came back to me. So the complexity of this issue is not very hard for me. When I put it on the ballot, I said, unless that changes, I will never put it on. We get one bite of the apple. Very clearly stated that. I'm with Commissioner Lee 100%. Unless there is 100% control by the Utah County Commission on the release and expense of any fourth quarter funds that go to UTA, I am an absolute no. Even though I do know that we need these funds locally and that the county, there are some benefits to the county residents because we increase our ability to maintain roads as a county and are able to free up $1 million of property tax general fund dollars that currently go to pay it in order to do that. So there are some benefits, but those benefits still, like Commissioner Lee stated, still go in the face of what was voted down by the public. And I asked for this to be on here, and I support it. It absolutely infuriates me because I know this commission worked hard, every one of us, for that Fifth Amendment, not the Sixth Amendment. So for me, it's not a complex issue. I understand, and you weren't meaning that it's not, but anyway.
Yeah, and so, I'm trying to think, I had a thought while you were talking. So again, this is a quick draft of an interlocal agreement. It's at a work session. It's not on the agenda for approval today. I noticed when I read through it, there was the error in not including the 2.8 million. That needs to be in there. If there are other things that you feel need to be in there, then that's why we're here at the work session, so we can work that out. If it's something where it's a no-go, then it's a no-go, and we'll,
I'm
move in
definitely
another
interested
direction.
in Commissioner Lee's resolution before. I don't want to say no-go because there are many aspects I support.
And that's what we're trying to do, is to have that good faith effort to move forward with an agreement. And when I came and requested to be a UTA trustee member, or put my name out there, one of the things I said that I would work on is this agreement to have that fourth quarter. And that's what I would have originally wanted with the Prop 1, was that there would be a pledge from UTA that Prop 1 money would have gone to BRT. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to work out to where it's a win-win situation. And it's my understanding that we're wanting to, if you're going to do you wouldn't look at enacting the fourth unless there was control over that UTA portion. And that's what we're hoping to do with that interlocal agreement. It's a draft. Yeah, sure, there's probably some things that are missed. I know for sure that 2.8 million was missed. If there's other things, then we can work that out, and that's why we have the work session.
Since MAG is overseeing all the projects and they rank and help and assist, there's one component I think never gets talked about, and this one's hard for me. The next project list is going to be for what year that MAG will do?
I believe it's like 21, 22, somewhere in that range.
Okay, so the reason that most of the mayors voted in support of the BRT project, at least from what they've said, and this isn't probably the only one, is the fact that at the end of the UTA using the third quarter, there in essence is a windfall. Now it's because of the time value of
Right.
money, and it's because we've sacrificed and given that up, but it's roughly over $100 million.
Say yes, probably 75, somewhere in that range.
No, with the interest and stuff, not just the literal payment of that. It's actually, it was presented as
I
over.
think it's calculated and it says 75.8.
What I'm saying is it was presented to the mayors as
I
over
think
$100 million.
I think it's 120. I think it's this one over.
Yes, with the time value of money, not the direct, right.
120.
Okay. The problem is with UTA bouncing back and forth, and this is my problem. We have a contract. I would like UTA to literally commit publicly so that we can properly plan for this county. And if they're gonna pay it back in 2024 without a fourth quarter, 2025, 2026, we need to know that. We can't live in limbo, because if there is gonna be a windfall and there is an ability to postpone certain projects because we can fast forward others that there is a demand for right now, that's how we can properly plan for these residents and for what meets our transportation needs. That's the part to me that's slightly offensive. Oh, so if we give them the fourth quarter, then all of a sudden they're paying this forward. We don't have all these, and it's like, okay, well, we've already funded 2019, 2020, 2021.
Sure.
That's my concern. So again, it's
Yeah.
down here on the list, but it's something we need to iron out, because the future people who will be voting on, the mayors and the following commission, that's important.
Right, yeah, and so as we look at this spreadsheet of what those commitments are, and then as UTA looks at what they expect revenues to be in 2024, they expect that they could start knocking down some of that current year, 2024 current year bond payment, 2025 current year bond payment, and 2026, that they could probably do the bond payment and O&M at that point, and then gear up to that 2028 total payoff. And this, but then again, they're accumulating all of that debt service. And so, yeah, you would have that, I guess it's based off of this calculation, the 120 million in 2028. I think they had some where they had an option of making that payment over time, or if it's a one lump sum. And I think some of that 120 million is based off of interest until 2039. Right. So again, this was done back in 2014. So we've got some better numbers now. We've got some actual numbers. So what this does is it says they expect 2024, 2025 that they could start paying it off of existing revenues, start paying towards that. But what this allows them to do is to relieve that whole burden starting in 2019, and then start paying back actually in 2019, start paying back the money that was spent in 2014, and then in 2020 start paying back 2015. So you get it quicker, you get less interest on it, because UTA wouldn't be required to pay interest on something that they didn't borrow during that year or period. So it's just that question of, would you want that freed up sooner than later?
Well, this is what I'd like to see. I'd like to see one controlled by the county when it comes to that fourth quarter cent sales tax, that 40%. The others are already controlled locally by the cities and the county. And that control doesn't mean, and that control includes the mayors in the projects, selections, and so forth into the future. Now, I realize when we do interlocal agreements that we can probably only do it legally. They're going to tell me for 50 years. I think that's all we can basically enter into is a 50-year contract. So I realize it does have a sunset, which would be 50 years, in which that control would come to the county, meaning the county commission and the mayors.
Right.
Ultimately, though, the vote, there'd have to be a vote from the county commission, but we would definitely want the mayors.
But we've always followed the mayors.
Right. Second is the payment. The payment on the monies that would be going through from the process, if it was enacted or voted on by the people and then enacted, would be first to the bond, like it has in here for the most part. But until that is satisfied, which would not. It's never going to be satisfied when it actually becomes due again, with the money that's out there. Sometimes I think that we're trying to use the money to do new bus services, but the obligation, the $47 million, is hanging out there the whole time, and we could put that into a sinking fund, and that sinking fund then, when we have a call date on it, could go to pay off the bond, or pay off more part of the bond, so that when UTA comes at that 2028, in which they want to take over the debt on that, then they could just pay whatever the remaining balance is. So I don't ever see it going to a new bus service system in the county, because our obligation is to pay off the debt. That's the payment part. And last, I personally am not going to step on the voters on this thing, and I think it needs to go to the ballot. But if it goes to the ballot, I'd be willing to go out there and say, here's the difference. Because we fought really hard at the legislature to get this on a legislative basis, and we lost. We thought we won. Actually, in the next day or so, the week after, we read through the bill and realized we lost.
We got bamboozled.
We lost on it. So here's an opportunity for us on a contractual basis to get what we couldn't do on a legislative basis. And I feel like we're gonna try to get something there that would make sense, so then we can take it to the vote of the people and say, here's the difference. If we have Prop 1 fail, and we present Prop 1.1, which is the same as Prop 1, I don't get it. I don't get that. Something has to change. So if we change what we have with this interlocal agreement, I would feel comfortable taking it to the people and say, this has changed. Now it's different than this. This is what we're doing. We're bringing back local control on this thing. We're bringing back, we're paying off debt. What do you think? And that's what I'd like to see possibly happen. And here's, you know, again, I didn't rewrite. These are for you guys. These are just my thoughts on it. Here's for the record, and here's also for Andrew. And I didn't go through and line by line necessarily take everything out and rewrite it. And a lot of it was just little notes off the side saying that this needs to be addressed and how does this work, and working down through that process. So
Sure, I don't disagree with what you said. In fact, I think for me, the other component to address the bribe, as you put it, I think we should hear from Matt Dugdale, our bond. Oh, there he is. You moved up. Thank you. I looked too far back. I think I'd like to hear from him, because that way the public understands the benefit or future savings that we're also looking at, or what we could, because it's often, you know, the mayors will always come and say, well, pay off this bond. Well, Matt can explain why we can't certainly pay off certain bonds at that time or whatever, right?
And maybe just, Renee, if you could add into the minutes that in addition to any of these changes, that 2.8 million for the design cost needs to be put in there as well.
Yeah,
So
thank
I
you
just
for
want to make sure.
catching that
If we
too.
go back in the minutes and somebody says, well, that wasn't included in there, we want to make sure that.
And
It
thank
was
you for your work on
stated
this.
that
I appreciate you. And again, this was at my request, because, and I know this is a work session, but I fully intend that I believe this commission will open this up for public comment too.
Yeah.
Because it's important.
Yeah, and so, like I said, we just want to do what we thought was that direction, and
Sure.
if you've got a different direction, then we
And
can
you
look
did,
at that
thank
as
you.
well. So
and I
thank
know
you for
it's not that you're the only one standing at the podium, so you know what I mean? There's no one else that we can direct the comments to. And you are a trustee and you volunteered for that
Yep, that's
position,
part of
so-
my job, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Huh?
Well, Commissioners, thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm Matt Dugdale with George K. Baum, Financial Advisor to the county. And it's a great day to be in Utah County. And just want to compliment the Commission for the due diligence that they've basically in looking at this issue. And they've asked me as Financial Advisor to look at some of the financials, and me and my fellow nerds have done so. And essentially as I look at this additional revenue that perhaps could come to the county, I always look at opportunities to pay down debt, as you mentioned, Commissioner Graves. And we've looked at the county's current outstanding bonds, and there are some bonds that could be basically paid down quickly with the aggregate revenues that would come in over the next 12 months. We've looked at the 2009 transportation bonds, which were issued to fund various road projects and highway projects throughout the county. We've also looked at the BRT bonds. As a financial gain to the county, the most beneficial would be to pay down some 2009 bonds. And essentially, if it were 22 million, you could add an additional 20% on a present value basis, and that's what the county would save. So, you know, we're looking at, 27 million on a net present value gain to the county. You can't spend present value dollars, but that's an economic gain to the county, so there are definite benefits to paying down debt. And whatever dollars do come in, if it is passed within the county, when those dollars come in, those could be used. The challenge with using the dollars, challenge is perhaps not the right word, but the BRT bonds were structured specifically with a call date in 2024, and that was put in because that's when UTA notified the county that that's when their financial models could facilitate starting to pay down debt, and we've discussed that, and Andrew did a good job mentioning that. And so if the county were to use aggregated funds over the next year, they would have to be escrowed or put into a fund, and that wouldn't be as compelling on the economic gain perspective as, say, the 2009 bonds. But it could be done. You have a lot of flexibility. And
I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought. I know the commission, we always receive updates from you on the 2009 series of bonds. Just for the public's notice, will you inform them what that 2009 bond went for, or what we did with it?
Sure, and I have kind of my list. I don't have it with me, but I believe a lot of that went towards, let's see, Geneva Road. A lot of it went to the Murdoch Connector, as I recall.
The trail.
And the trail, I believe also, it went on to, yes. Thank you, Richard. So, and that bond's been, from a cost perspective, good for the county. It's been a low-cost bond. There were some economic advantages during the credit crisis, and there was some tax benefit. Basically, there's a subsidy involved, and the county gets some subsidy dollars from the U.S. Treasury. It was a Build America bond, they called it. The county has asked me to look at some of the projections that UTA has presented and to the county on use of those funds, and haven't performed a forensic audit, but I have looked at their financial model and have been able to track their calculations and what they've projected by way of being able to free up their dollars to start paying down the obligation to the county. So I've been able to track those and will continue to do so. From the perspective of this interlocal, I haven't seen, Andrew, that draft. I'd love to see a copy of that, and there are some things that I'd work with the commission on to make sure that any interlocal that is drafted meets your bond covenants as well. So, any other questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Not for me, thank you.
Okay, great,
Thank you.
thanks.
All right, we appreciate that presentation. This is a very intriguing topic, and we look forward to further discussion on it. I would, at this time, as chair, exercise my authority to allow any additional public comment to share their thoughts on this, as this is a tax issue that would directly affect them. If there are any.
Richard Nilsson, Public Works. I feel like I just need to take just a couple of minutes here. We've talked a lot about the 40% of this that would go to UTA. The other 60% is the part that I'm interested in. 40% of it that would be through the city and the counties for projects. As you're aware from the process we go through with MAG every couple of years to look at projects throughout the county, we're in the process of finalizing that right now. We've been doing it over the last several months this year. Had approximately $100 million in project requests with about $40 million available for funding. I know those are rough numbers, but there's a lot more need out there for projects than we have available funding. The other 20% that would come to the county is something that we could utilize on a county basis for maintenance of roads. Currently, we get about $3 million a year in B road money. As we've looked at it over the last few years, in order to have our roads at the level they need to be, our annual road budget would need to be somewhere in the $9 million range. That's quite a big difference of where we're at. This money that would come in, approximately $3.5 million, would go a long ways towards getting our roads in the condition that they would need to be and help us maintain those roads going forward. So
In other words, we could have gold-plated chip seals?
No. But we might get up to the Volkswagen model instead of the Yugo. So I won't say we'll get to the Cadillac. So anyway, that's just kind of my thoughts on it. It is something that I think as we move forward, one thing that I would maybe caution on is as we're looking at it from a county perspective, if we enact it as the county, then we do get that 20%. If we don't enact it and the cities do, then we as the county kind of get left out and don't get that 20% that would go to road maintenance. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather Williamson. I'm a resident in Saratoga Springs. I'm also state director for Americans for Prosperity Utah. So I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of the members of our organization who are very concerned about this issue. Again, I'm really grateful and really honored to be able to hear from Commissioner Graves and Commissioner Lee that you know, you want more local control if you're going to agree to this issue. You know, that is true. Residents did vote this down resoundingly in 2015, and I think that they had a lot of concerns. I think tax increases in general are bad policy, but
If a tax increase is necessary, I think voters deserve the opportunity to hear why and deserve the ability to vote on that. And I believe that with enough information, and if it is necessary and it is needed, that voters would make that decision, and they have the right to be able. That's good policy. If you're taking from taxpayers and let taxpayers have that opportunity to say yes or no in regards to that issue. I'm concerned about UTA being able to pay anything. I don't understand how an organization that's $2 billion in debt, and for every dollar that they bring in, they spend $290, is going to be able to pay anything off right now. I know Salt Lake County agreed to the sales tax increase, but it was also going around voters to do so. Legislators, I was there during the session, and I saw the bill go from really, really, really bad to pretty, bad, and was negotiating with legislators the entire time. I was frustrated with the lack of accountability that just keeps getting kicked to other people. Legislators don't want to take accountability for a tax increase. In fact, they wanted to rebrand and rename UTA because they knew that the people and citizens of Utah are fed up with it. They're fed up with the debt. They're fed up with them not like doing anything with their tax dollars that keep getting spent and going nowhere. And so, that is something to take into consideration. I'm grateful to hear that you guys are on board with, more local control and not just passing this on the county level. And my recommendation would be, if you are going to consider this, to definitely put it on the ballot and let voters decide. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comment?
I'm Pam Jones from Provo. 15 years ago, I was in a very bad traffic accident. I was on the short end of pedestrian pickup truck encounter. I had to go on disability, and when I became of age, so to speak, regular Social Security, I have been unable to work full-time and not very much part-time since then. And I have become a self-appointed advocate for people who are on fixed and low income. Every time some taxing ability entity, state, county, city, whatever, decides they want more money to spend, and of course they always need it, I cringe because I can't go anywhere. I can't knock on Social Security's door and say, hey, I need more money so that I can pay towards a tax increase or a bond or whatever method government uses to take money from people. There are a lot of people in my position in one form or another, being on Social Security or disability or losing their jobs or whatever. If it's been a while since you were a starving college student, you might have forgotten what it's like to go around for a week with 4 cents in your wallet. I did that a couple of times. I am opposed to any kind of tax increase, whether it's for a bond or sales tax or property tax, or I'm in favor of carpet tax. So I would suggest that you consider that some of the people in the county are not enjoying the overall state prosperity that the governor likes to brag about. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Susan Vivian. I live in Provo. And one concern that I have, I am also on Social Security, and I don't have extra money to spend on another 10-cent. I'm sorry, it makes me emotional. 10-cent gas increase, and also this is their fourth quarter cent tax increase. Who's to say they won't come back for a fifth or a sixth?
They're already talking about it.
Well,
Yeah, okay. There's the point right there. It's like taxpayers are a bottomless pit of taking our money, and I'm sick of it. So we need to be budget wise. Somehow the government needs to tighten up instead of keep on digging into our wallets and taking more of our money. We can't afford it. We can't. And so I just suggest that maybe we could just vote no on this. We've already done that. And I don't know what they could possibly do to make voters feel confident that this is a good idea on any level. So that's just my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, gentlemen. My name is Jen Ottens. I've lived in Linden for 28 years and in Utah County for 31 years, having moved here to go to college from Texas. I'd like to first thank you very much for your service because the national government gets the big publicity, but the local governments are the most important foundational component of the freedoms and pursuit of happiness that we as Americans most greatly cherish. And sometimes it's an incredibly difficult, complex, and thankless job. And I'd like to personally extend my thanks to you for the time and the effort you didn't have to serve. And I appreciate the fact that you have. That being said, I am the mother of 2 autistic sons. They are relatively high functioning, and they have adapted to their challenges well. However, taxes keep going up, and we voted no on this. I remember personally voting no on this. And personally, all I have seen that is the real difference between this proposed tax increase and what was proposed last time is the fact that they're going to give you a little cut. And while I realize when I was a teenager, I worked building roads for our county as a senior for the summer. I built roads, and I know what it's like to shuffle things around and decide which roads have to be worked on the most by traffic and by need, and this one's almost impassable and there's not as many people, but it's still, I know a little about what it is. But as a mom, I know a lot about having to live within a budget and about having to watch every single penny. And I've watched my taxes go way up. And even though we've gotten a tax cut from our president, at the same time, Utah runs in a surplus. And I just don't see any reason why UTA should be given a lot more of this money when they've been given money and they're continually in the red. And what's to say they're ever going to pay back? And we don't see very much benefit here, but we get presented with the bill. And, I'm also feeling abused as a voter because we voted on this. And now I feel like they're just trying to go around. They're just trying to find some way to sweeten the pot enough that our local elected officials will go around we the people. And
our economy is doing better. I see hiring signs up everywhere. Hopefully, more of our younger people, hopefully those older ones who would like to get out and work will be able to find a job. Hopefully, more taxes will be generated that way, so we can address the 20% that is needed for the county roads. But I personally am very much against this tax. There's not enough responsibility. I would like to see some contractual obligations written in to ensure that we get more of it. But I certainly want it, if it's going to truly be considered, that we get a vote on it. Because unless it's greatly changed, and even then, we're really being squeezed, I want the opportunity to say yay or nay. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Today.
My name is Claude Richards from Orem, Utah, and I want to congratulate Commissioner Lee for recognizing the bribe nature of this thing. It's frustrating to me to see a presentation that says, if you don't take this money now, somebody else is going to get it. It occurs to me that while we're talking about an issue that's very complex, it's also very sterile. The discussion is couched in terms of the third quarter money will pay, the UTA will pay, the dollars will come in, and I hadn't once heard anything about the citizens being mentioned, that all of that money is coming from the citizens. And so I appreciate your willingness to require this to go to a vote of the people. The reason we do legislation that tries to get around the vote of the people is because we know the people aren't going to like it. If it's a really good idea, and you can make the case that it's a really good idea and sell it to the public, then fine. But, you know, we've had this rammed down our throat a couple of times. We had the referendum petition in Orem and Provo that was just totally railroaded over. And so it's a very frustrating thing. I just want to make the comment, every tax that is passed is a drag on the economy. We always talk about this in terms of economic development, but every tax is a drag on the economy, and if you get enough of those drags, the economy stagnates. I just recently returned from East Germany, where the evidence was very clear what happens when you go to the logical extent of that. So I appreciate your willingness to guarantee that this will go to a vote of the people. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. All right, seeing no additional public comment, we'll go ahead and move to our second work session presentation. This is from the Central Utah Water Conservancy District, and we'll turn the time to Gene and his crew.
Commissioners, thank you. My name is Tom Bruton. I'm an Assistant General Manager with the Central Utah Water Conservancy District. Here today also is Christine Finlinson, another Assistant General Manager with Central Utah Water, and Gene Shawcroft, our General Manager. And we appreciate this opportunity. Ms. Campbell handed out our presentation today, and hopefully we'll be able to pull that up so the public and everyone can see that. We are in the process under state statute now, as considerations for tax increases are being made. The truth in taxation process does require that we meet with the appointing bodies of our members of our Board of Trustees. Our organization spans across eight counties in the state. If you go to slide number 1 in the lower right corner there, which is an overview of the state, you'll see we start in eastern Utah in Uintah County, move west in Duchesne and Wasatch County. We also take in a small portion of Summit County to the north, and then starting in the north of the state, Salt Lake County, Utah County, a portion of Juab County, and Sanpete County. It's interesting that recently the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute published a regional briefing about the projected population growth. And Utah County has a very unique position of looking forward to an additional 1 million people between now and the year 2065. Coupled with the 600 to 700,000 in Salt Lake, the Wasatch Front will continue to grow, and the quality of life that we've all expected and things we want to be able to maintain. And as we see our role in this, we continue to move forth with projects, and I'll be going through a few of those very, very briefly here. Slide number 2 is our fiscal year 2018-2019 expenditures budget. As you can see from that, 49% of our budget is construction related. In Utah County, we are at this time making final completion on the Olmsted Power Plant. As you've driven up Provo Canyon, you've seen that power plant, and that is a water supply protecting project. It'll be generating power. It is generating power, and we look forward to that being completed very, very soon. Additionally, as you've gone in South Utah County here, you've seen a pipeline as you approach Spanish Fork Canyon that is going to the south. That is what we call our Utah Lake System pipeline. It's a 60-inch pipeline. Will carry water into South Utah County. Now, what we would appreciate is knowing exactly where these people are going to be, because water has an interesting characteristics. It's very heavy, and it takes a long time to plan and procure the necessary rights of way, and to go through construction, and then to have a water supply for those pipelines. And as we see what is happening in Utah County and throughout the state, but particularly in Utah County with the projected growth, we are trying to work with the entities here. And we see our role, Central Utah Water Conservancy District, as being a regionalized planning entity to help in conjunction with cities, the county, Mountain Land Association of Governments, in helping to prepare for that future day. Again, on slide number 2, 49% construction related. We also have debt of 31%. That was debt that was used to prepay the federal obligation for the blocks of water that are currently being used and will be used in the future for deliveries for the Central Utah project. That debt was actually realized a great savings as we were able to prepay the government and get a cost savings from so doing. And then the other item is other district and project operations are 20%. Slide number 3. We have a certified tax rate that would bring in currently $56.3 million. Legislature is authorized, and this is a capping element for taxing for our district. We can go to a 0004 rate. Currently, the certified rate is 000374. We are proposing, and our board is considering, moving that to 0004, which would be a net difference of $3.9 million. The next slide shows the direct effect in the local Utah County area. And again, this is a slide specific to this county. We are making similar presentations throughout the district area. If the average home value is estimated at $305,000, the certified rate would be $62.80. The authorized rate would be $67.17, creating a net difference of $4.37 on an annual basis, which is a 7% increase. Next slide, number 5. Why should the district maintain the 0004 rate? Number 1, again, it was authorized by legislative statute, and it was put at a rate that was felt would be a good tool for developing water in the state of Utah, not being able to be exceeded. It mitigates unpredictable federal contributions. You've all heard of the Central Utah Project. The Central Utah Project was mainly funded with federal dollars. As times have gone on and the years have come and passed, those contributions have been diminishing and are becoming more unpredictable. And we, as a state and as a people, need to prepare for our future. You know, of that million people that are coming in, the projections are that 60 to 70% of those people will be our own natural growth, our own children, our own grandchildren. I'm appreciative as being an empty nester now of having two of my families here on the Wasatch Front in Utah County and 2 in Duchesne County, where my home is. And that, as I see my grandchildren, as you will too, we hope we can keep that greatest resource that we have in our state. So that's what we're looking to do, is try to move along that line. Other items, why should we do this? Meeting long-term financial obligations, which I mentioned a little bit of. We complement our boards, both current and our past ones, on having that kind of vision.
We are always looking forward 50 years. We have to. Look how long the Central Utah project took to plan and to build and to now being used. And you need to build the capacity for those people that are coming that we don't even know their names or their faces yet. Our bonding, we do have bonding, a lot of bonded debt, and the rate on that bonded debt is kept at a minimum as we keep it at the 0004 rate. And then the final item is if we don't take advantage of this, or if we don't use this tool, then there is some lost revenue from those years that we aren't at our maximum rate. Projects that will be completed, slide number 6. We have treatment plants. In fact, as we speak, our board has recently purchased land in South Utah County, looking at a regionalized water treatment plant that will be able to serve the southern and western parts of the county. Now, do we have that exact size of that plant ready? No, we don't. Do we know people are coming? Yes, we do. And as we look at the I-15 corridor, and as we see how growth is going to be projected, we know that that's where a major portion of this growth is going to be. Also, we have an aging infrastructure issue like much of the United States does. Our understanding is right now there's $1 trillion worth of work across the United States to rehab and repair aging infrastructure, and I think that's just water infrastructure. We've had that happen on our own. We have a large pipeline out in the Uinta Basin that brings water to the Strawberry Reservoir and then in turn to the Wasatch Front that needs replaced. That is on the order of $25 million. As we see our aging structures starting to diminish in capacity and in reliability, we need to plan, be forward thinking and plan to replace those. ULS Pipeline, we talked about, Olmsted Power Plant. Also, we like to take advantage of opportunities, and our board, again, we can be nothing but complimentary on this. As large-scale water rights do become available and they can be used for the public good, we like to take advantage of that opportunity. Case in point, Geneva Steel. When Geneva Steel went out of business, the water rights were available. Central Utah was able to purchase those. A project was developed. We call it the Central Water Project. We've run a pipeline on the north side of Utah Lake, and now there are deliveries being made in the Saratoga Springs and Eagle Mountain areas. Again, looking forward to that growth that we're anticipating on an even larger scale in western Utah County. Planning and studies, we are planning on being there at the table and assisting and in the role that the cities and the county like us to help in to plan for the growth of this area. And then unplanned and emergency projects, we too have things happen we don't like. Sometimes a slide will affect a pipeline or some nature like that. Right now, you've heard about the Dollar Ridge fire out in the Wasatch and Duchesne County areas, like say my home area. And we're watching as water quality and slide issues are happening out there and need to be able to respond to that. Finally, slide number 7. Again, this is a report to the appointing governing board for our trustees. We will be having 2 public hearings in regarding to this before the final review by our board and our the vote of the board on August 15th. August 9th at 6 o'clock, we will be at our Orem office at 355 West University Parkway, and then August 14th in Roosevelt out in the Uinta Basin at the Crossroads Senior Center. So we appreciate being able to work as part of this wonderful community, both in Utah County and in the Central Utah Water Conservancy District project area as a whole. And commissioners, I'll leave it at that, unless you'd like to questions or whatever you'd like.
I don't have questions. I just have a couple comments. First, in your hometown, Duchesne does have the second best derby next to Utah County.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
So, first off, I know some in the public think it may be self-serving and sometimes sound like, oh, we're touting how good we are. Gene and your staff does a tremendous job. And this county should not fear, because I believe from the county standpoint, we are represented adequately and the way we should be with my fellow commissioners, not me, but these 2 are on that board and do protect because of how they believe. To me, the biggest problem facing Utah County, and you addressed it, in every report we see in growth, is water. Water, water, water. From loss into yards or whatever, and aging infrastructure. I don't think the residents understand. Aging infrastructure creates ends up being loss of water. And so replacing that and putting that water back into our system. The reason I wanted to make these comments, because you guys are forward-thinking, do a great job. Recently in the Daily Herald, I believe they copied an article from the Standard Examiner talking about our Pioneer water situation. And I do not believe that's necessarily the case in Central Utah Water. I believe you are actually forward-thinking, and again, would like to praise how you do it. In regards to truth in taxation, I believe it's important for the citizens to realize my personal preference is doing it this way, where you come and present it. I believe that the tax policy should be fixed so that you don't have to come, meaning I think legislatures should put tax policy where it automatically increases based on inflation and or increases by Social Security so that it matches to meet the rising needs of construction costs, so that we don't have to do that process and there's an agreed upon and voted upon policy. That would be my, but again, thank you for you guys and all your work and the way you do it.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, that concludes our work sessions. We will now open for general public comment, if there are any, before moving into our closed sessions.
Sheriff Tracy, just wanted to take a minute. This is my last commission meeting that I'll be attending as sheriff of the Utah County. I'm retiring this Friday, as most people know, on August 3rd, after working 41 years as a Utah County employee. 25 years of that as a deputy sheriff, 15 and a half years as the sheriff. I started my employment in Utah County August 9th, 1977. I was a 23-year-old man, and I am retiring August 3rd, 2018, just 6 days short of 41 years. I'd like to take a few minutes at the end of this career and make a few remarks. In 1977, I was one of 26 deputies, which was the entire number of enforcement and corrections deputies that were employed by the county. The jail was located under the viaduct on Center Street, and it had a capacity of less than total capacity of less than 50 beds. The population of Utah County was approximately 180,000. Today, the population of Utah County is about 600,000. There are just under 300 sworn deputies that work at the sheriff's office, and 519 employees total. And the jail capacity is just at 1,200 beds. To be sure, within the span of a single career, I have witnessed a significant growth and change in both the demographics and the nature of the citizens of Utah County as we transitioned from a fairly quiet, mostly small, rural population into a bustling, densely populated, and large urban county. And I have witnessed the changing nature and needs of those who work and provide public safety for the citizens of this county. There's been speculation and rumor as to why I've chosen to step down at this time and not finish the last 5 months of my final 4-year term. There are 3 main reasons. First, over the past 18 to 24 months, my health has deteriorated, and I find it increasingly difficult to maintain the necessary strength to be efficient and to be engaged as much as this position demands. Second, due to the fact that this year's electoral process has narrowed down the field of candidates who ran for sheriff to just a single remaining candidate who will be on the November ballot, this affords us an opportunity to do something that has been done in the past, and that would be to replace me as sheriff at this time in the last few months of my career. Having the incoming sheriff be able to have input in the upcoming budget discussions and influence and help shape the direction of the upcoming budget discussions in relation to his priorities and to his initiatives that he outlined to the citizens of Utah County when he ran for office, I think is immeasurable. I think it's important. It's something that has been a practice that has been in place for at least the last 3 sheriffs as of the time when I do retire. For history, past Sheriff Mac Hawley resigned prior to finishing his last full term and Dave Bateman was appointed sheriff. And he was able to prepare and present his budget to the Utah County Commission at that time that he would be required to operate within for that first full year that he was sheriff. And in a similar situation today, I was the sole individual on the ballot in November prior to my becoming sheriff. Although I worked at the sheriff's office and it was an internal process, then Sheriff Bateman, stepped aside, and I was able to prepare the 2002 preparations for the 2003 budget and present those to the commission. It allowed me to put my stamp on that budget as I walked into my first year being sheriff. Resigning as sheriff at this time will allow the incoming sheriff, Mike Smith, the same opportunity that I had as the other past sheriffs have had to create a budget that he has prepared according to his priorities and his initiatives. Because there is a person involved in this process that's not currently within the employ of Utah County, it has become much more noticeable as this process has gone on, where in prior times it has mostly been just an internal issue within the county. In the very best of times, so that's one of the reasons I think there's been some concern by people of why I was leaving at this time and whether it was something that was planned to disrupt. It could be no further from the truth. This is an opportunity to actually move this new incoming sheriff into the sheriff's budget preparations timeline to be able to put his stamp on that budget. The third reason I am leaving, the employees of Utah Sheriff's Office are some of the hardest working government employees that one will ever find. The old and now tired mantra of doing more with less has been a staple of the Utah County Commission for the entire 41 years I have been here. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But in the very best of times, the Sheriff's Office has operated on the thin edge of minimal numbers of employees to handle the public safety workload that is statutorily mandated by law. County workers have always shouldered a larger workload per employee than any other county group of employees that I can think of anywhere in the state, and especially along the Wasatch Front. The evidence is in the statistics. Currently, Utah County has 17 employees per each 10,000 county residents. The next lowest county has 25 employees per 10,000 county residents. Utah County's per capita tax assessment is the lowest in the state. Of the 29 counties, Utah County is 29th in the collection rate of those taxes. If we were double the tax that we collect, we would still be either 29th or just barely 28th. So we have an issue with sufficient revenue, and it has been that way for quite some time. During the recession of 2008, the Sheriff's Office eliminated 26 sworn positions from the staffing plan to help meet a significant cut in budget. Positions that were needed and represented an unsustainable loss of workforce from an already marginally thin, adequate workforce. The workload of those missing 26 people was then distributed across the remaining deputies who were already maxed out. Since the 2008 reduction in workforce, which was 10 years ago, only 6 additional deputies have been hired in that time. And they were positioned in the jail when the jail expansion that occurred back in 2007 should have required an additional 24 deputies to open. They were not provided, and the jail opened anyway. Being with those 6, that really puts the jail down 18 positions of what total staffing should have been. And now we are down an additional 26 deputies because we cannot find applicants to apply. The question at issue now is, are we as elected county officers providing the level of services that the citizens of Utah County expect and that they believe they are getting? From what we at the Sheriff's Office are experiencing right now, the answer to that is no. What then are the issues? The 2 main issues that I see are an inadequate budget that has not kept pace with competitive wages and an ever-shrinking operational budget that as a percentage of the overall budget continues to shrink and not allow for adequate funding of training and equipment. We are losing deputies weekly due to the retirement issue and also to those that are moving to other jobs that pay better within our communities, local communities, and the other counties. The competition for peace officers and deputies have become intense in Utah. Because of the good economy, the competition for any job has become fierce, and we are at the bottom of the barrel. County wages and benefits are no longer competitive enough to hold presently employed sworn deputies or attract replacement deputies. The inadequate wage and benefit issues come about due to the fact that too little attention to the issue has been given, and decisions about how to fix this issue have been implemented too slowly. While it is true that a total of 9.5% increase in wages has been authorized by the Commission this year, the bulk of that wage increase is just now being implemented. The wage study increases that are just now being implemented were actually from a study that occurred and started 2 years ago and was finished 18 months ago. And yet, as it is fully implemented at the 9.5%, we still find ourselves between 10 and 12% behind the wage that is being paid by other places that causes these people to leave. A statement by a commissioner recently was, don't the employees appreciate the fact that we have increased wages 9.5% this year? Yes, they do, and they do appreciate it. But I would turn the question around. What has not, or what did not occur in the recent years to allow county wages to become so far out of place that a 9.5% increase that was implemented still left county law enforcement about 10% behind others' wages that are being paid with benefits. A lack of available tax revenue to fund the needed countywide budget increases without having to dip into the fund balance and a slow speed of action surrounding the decisions made to meet those needs has driven us to this present situation where we have an employment crisis. And it's not hyperbole to use that word crisis. I think we're in a crisis. When we're down 26 positions in the jail, that workload goes back upon people with mandatory overtime and too many hours being worked. I and the other 519 employees of the Sheriff's Office know that the present commission did not create all these problems. In fact, these problems have been going on for many years. But the commission is the only group that can solve these problems. And that I look to you for. Every department head and elected official submits budget requests every year for that next year. And every year the county auditor announces that the budget requests have exceeded the anticipated revenue by X amount of millions. Some years have been 3, some 4 or 5. I think even last year it might have been 7,000 million or 7 million that we were out when we first started. And those requests are based against anticipated revenues. But the question is never asked, are those revenues or are those requests reasonable in the light of what is necessary to provide the level of service to the people of the county that they expect? Rather, we are normally asked to just pound whatever that revenue expectation is into the budget and try to live within those means, and that continually kicks the can down the road in the area of trying to provide enough services, enough money for equipment and training to solve the issues of actually providing the service level necessary. In closing, I'm asking you, the commission, to trust the judgment of the department heads. They're your at-will employees and the other county elected officials that were elected by those in this community to help put together a level of a program that and services that meets the expectations of those people in the county. They are the experts in the field. They are in the trenches. They know what it costs to provide adequate professional services that the citizens of Utah County demand. And I think that in this next budget session, I would like to see a change in a mindset about looking at if these are the requests from those department heads and elected officials, if they're reasonable, how do we go about looking to create the revenue necessary to make sure that those services are provided? I thank you for your time. It has been an honor and a privilege to be here for those 41 years to represent the people of Utah County in public safety. And I do believe that as far as a career, there could not have been a better one that would work for me in my efforts to help and do what I felt was important for the community of Utah County. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Was there a question?
No, I was just gonna make a comment. I was unfortunately not here the last time you were. And I shared these with you privately. I would like to say them publicly. Thank you to you and your sweet wife, who also, when you serve, she serves. And I know that. I've had the opportunity to get to know you, find you to be such an honorable man that I've respected and had the honor to get to know you. And how you represent those 519 individuals to me will be the greatest thing that I experienced as a commissioner. And I truly have appreciated that. And thank you for your service.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate how difficult the task is as a commission.
Yeah.
I would never want that job. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. You're greatly appreciated. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to our closed meetings at this time.
For the bill and for the personnel, we need to escalate it because I need to let you guys know. So you're aware, right?
Absolutely. Did you guys know what the process is?
Thank you. Yes.
Washington.